Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Blinding rage can transform a quiet home into a war zone in seconds. They once called us the perfect couple. Illusions crumble fast. Catching her with my friend ignited a fury I never knew existed. Blood on the floor, panicked screams, betrayal unleashed me. This isn't a gentle bedtime story. I regret the fists, not the truth they forced out. That scar on my brow holds a violent vow. Prison simply became my penance for a moment's blind wrath. Yet returning from the ashes, I confront every single lie left behind. Steady your heart. Betrayal, revenge, and redemption surge in my tale. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. I still remember the night I realized just how fragile my own confidence was. Back then, I was all big talk and rowdy jokes, never thinking there might be real consequences. My name is Aiden Gray, and I grew up in a quiet Midwestern town where football games on Friday nights and barbecue cookouts on Saturday pretty much defined our social calendar. If you didn't play sports, you at least pretended you did. If you didn't hunt or fish, you claimed you would someday. It was that kind of place. Simple on the surface, but everyone had a little spark of rebellion just waiting to be lit. My closest friend, James Carter, was the one who usually struck that spark. We'd known each other since elementary school, two skinny boys daring each other to jump off hay bales or ride bikes with no hands down the gravel roads. Over time, our dares turned into jokes, and our jokes turned into full-blown comedic acts we tried out on anyone who would listen. We loved to toss out a certain line when passing random people, especially in unexpected moments. James started it, he shouted, "How's your wife and my kids?" at some unsuspecting guy at the county fair. That joke stuck with us. We said it to bartenders, strangers in parking lots, or random tourists visiting our small town. It was stupid, it was juvenile, but we thought it was the funniest thing ever. I was the quieter half of the duo in high school, but once I hit college, something in me flipped. I started feeling unstoppable. Maybe it was being away from home for the first time, or maybe it was the newfound freedom of going out whenever I wanted. Suddenly, my jokes got louder. My voice carried a bit more swagger, and I started riling people up with James on the weekends. We didn't really go looking for trouble. At least that's what I told myself. But the truth was, if the slightest chance of excitement knocked on my door, I was there. One night, James and I decided to drive into the nearest city, a 30-minute trek, just to find a new bar. We were bored with the same old neon beer signs and the same old bartenders who already knew our names. So we hopped in James's beat-up sedan and cruised to the Iron Tap, a downtown hangout rumored to have cheap drinks and a good crowd. Inside, it was packed. Half the tables were filled with college kids, the rest with regular locals who looked like they'd been there for decades. James spotted a group of girls by the pool tables. He nudged me and murmured, "Dude, let's get a drink. See if they're up for a few rounds." He was always more direct than me when it came to flirting, but I was usually game. We ordered beers at the bar, and while we waited, an older guy in a leather jacket passed by. James caught my eye and raised his eyebrows. Immediately, I knew what he wanted me to do. The man was maybe in his early 30s, with a tough look in his eye that said he'd seen his share of scraps, but I was feeling cocky, like always. So I turned, raised my voice, and let it rip. "Hey man, how's your wife and my kids?" To this day, I can't say if the line itself set him off or if he was just itching for a fight. The second it left my mouth, the guy whipped around, scowling. His stare drilled into me. James was behind me, stifling a laugh, but my heart started pounding. I remember thinking, this is exactly what Mom warned me about, running my mouth one day to the wrong person. Leather Jacket just shook his head. "What did you say?" He stepped closer, fists already curling at his sides. I swallowed, trying to keep the bravado going. "Man, it's just a joke," I said. "We say it to everyone." "You think I'm everyone?" he snapped back. His voice had this quiet anger, not the drunk, sloppy yelling you sometimes see. That made it scarier. I tried to backtrack, politely told him, "No offense, buddy. Seriously, we're just messing around." But it was too late. I could see I'd poked the wrong bear. James, for once, went silent. He was usually the one jumping in to calm people down, but he froze. I felt cornered, People at nearby tables had gone quiet, half turned their attention to what was happening. The bartender shouted something along the lines of, "Take it outside!" But Leatherjacket didn't budge. He glared at me as though I'd insulted everything he cared about. I exhaled, setting my beer on the bar. My hands felt clammy. "Look," I said again, "it was a bad joke. My friend and I are used to messing around. If I offended you, I'm sorry." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "And if I took that personally, maybe you ought to pay up for it." Like an idiot, I tried to lighten the mood. "Well, I don't carry cash, man," I cracked, forcing a grin that even James didn't return. That was it. Leatherjacket lunged. I stumbled back, my arms flailing to keep balance. Before I knew it, he swung a fist toward my jaw, and although I jerked to the side, the punch still clipped me on the ear. Pain exploded in my head. Someone yelled, "Hey, break it up!" But I was already reeling. Instinct made me raise my fists to protect my face, but I wasn't fast enough. He lunged again, grabbing the collar of my shirt, and slammed me into the edge of a pool table. My eyes watered from the impact. James tried to step between us, but the guy shoved him away with a single stiff arm. Then he drove me backward until I crashed into the corner of the bar. Glasses clinked and toppled around me. I was pinned in place, arms twisted. At that point, everything blurred. I guess my survival instinct kicked in and I started swinging. One punch landed on his ribs, but it didn't slow him down. He wrenched my shoulder back and hurled me face first. My forehead smacked something, maybe the bar's corner or a ledge. Doesn't matter. Pain just shot through me like a bolt of lightning, and my vision darkened. Shouts came from all sides. "Get security! Call the cops!" Holy shit, is that blood? It was. My blood. I remember touching my left brow, and my fingertips came away slick and hot. Next thing I knew, bouncers were yanking the guy off me. James was grabbing my arm, and everything felt distant, like my head was stuffed with cotton. I remember hearing someone cussing me out, telling me to get the hell out. I was half carried out the door, staggering and bleeding. The sidewalk was spinning under my feet. An ambulance arrived at some point. I recalled James hovering over me, his face pale. He kept muttering, "Damn it, Aiden, I'm so sorry. We never should have done that stupid line." My mouth opened, but no real words came out. My skull was throbbing in waves, my body shaking from adrenaline. I ended up in the emergency room with a gash running from my eyebrow down to my cheekbone. The doctors said it missed my eye by maybe half an inch. They stitched me up, told me I was lucky to be alive and not to move around too much. I sat there, feeling a swirl of shame and relief, while James paced in the corridor, beating himself up. My phone buzzed with text messages from friends who'd heard rumors of a brawl. That was the night everything changed physically and emotionally. The cut healed into a long scar that runs in a crooked line on my face, a reminder of how a cheap joke can cost you more than you expect. It also left me with a lingering ache in my pride. I'd thought I was untouchable. That night I discovered just how easily I could be knocked down. And after the stitches, the migraines, and the humiliating questions from my parents, I decided it might be time to reevaluate what I found funny. It wasn't immediate, like flipping a switch, but something in me slowed down. I realized my mouth wrote checks my fists couldn't always cash. That scar? It became the first real piece of humility I'd ever known. And to my surprise, it would set the tone for a much bigger reckoning in my life, one I never could have predicted. By the time I got to college, I carried that scar like a badge I hadn't earned. Some people assumed it gave me a tough edge, but I knew better. Deep down, it was a permanent stamp of my own idiocy. Still, I wasn't about to fall off the planet and become a monk. I was just more cautious, maybe a little quieter when it came to random strangers. James and I stayed friends, though we drifted apart a bit. He went off to a different university across the state, while I stuck closer to home. We'd catch up over the phone, occasionally meet for a weekend party, but I no longer had that same reckless energy. My new focus was studying chemical engineering. I had decent grades in high school, and I thought, why not aim for something that could lead to a solid career? It felt like a smart move, like I was finally channeling my impulsiveness into something that might pay off down the line. Freshman year was a blur of classes, campus events, and forging new friendships. I didn't stand out as the loud guy in the corner anymore. If anything, I became the one people confided in, telling me about their problems or heartbreaks. A big reason was how I carried myself. Everyone assumed the scar made me mysterious, which was a load of crap. But I guess if it helped them feel comfortable enough to share their stories, that was fine by me. When I talk about that time, I have to mention the day I first saw Veronica. It was at the start of sophomore year. I was in line at the campus bookstore, juggling an armful of textbooks that cost more than my monthly rent. She was 2 people ahead of me, wearing a red hoodie and flipping through a biology guide as if she was deciding whether it was worth it. I was intrigued right away, not just because she was attractive, but because she kept muttering softly to herself, reading a line from the book, then shaking her head like she disagreed with it. She had this focused energy that drew me in. We ended up at the same cashier. She set her biology book on the counter and said to me, "You ever get the feeling you're paying to learn something you'll never actually use?" The directness took me by surprise. I managed to smile. "Only every time I buy a new calculus text," I joked, "though maybe it'll come in handy someday." She huffed a little laugh, then narrowed her eyes at me. "You in engineering?" "Chemical, yeah. Hoping to turn it into a career at some pharmaceutical company or something." She nodded, sizing me up. "I'm Veronica, pre-med track, or so I keep telling myself." After that, we walked out of the bookstore together. The late summer sun was glaring down on us, but neither of us seemed to mind. We must have talked an hour straight about our classes, professors, our hometowns, and how campus life sometimes felt like being trapped in a bubble. I noticed her eyes occasionally flick to the scar on my face. I waited for the question, but she never asked. There was a hint of curiosity there, but also a certain respect, like if it was important, I'd bring it up on my own. Over the next few weeks, we studied together in the library, grabbed coffee between classes, and joked about the insane cost of tuition. Something about her felt electric. She had a confidence that danced on the edge of arrogance, but it never quite fell off. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't love it. She could out-argue me on almost any topic, from ethics in medicine to the best pizza joint in town. We'd banter, then burst out laughing because neither of us could keep a straight face long enough to be mad. One afternoon, we headed to a park near campus, just a small patch of green with some benches and a walking path. We were supposed to discuss a group project, but instead, we ended up sharing our biggest hopes and silliest fears. That's when she asked me about the scar. I think she noticed I was picking at it absent-mindedly. I told her the bar story, how I used to mouth off and how it nearly cost me my sight. For the first time in a while, I felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me, but she took it in stride. She said, "So you learned your lesson, right? You can still be yourself, but maybe not aim your jokes at random guys in leather jackets." Her tone was playful, yet there was an undercurrent of sincerity. It felt good that she didn't mock me or pity me. She just got it. Soon enough, people around campus started associating us with each other. "Where's Veronica?" they'd ask me. "Is Aiden joining us?" they'd ask her. It became natural. We'd grab lunch in the dining hall, our trays filled with whatever questionable food they were serving that day. We'd tease each other about snack choices. She always poked fun at my obsession with soda, said I should know better as a future health professional. I'd joked that her medical textbooks were brainwashing her. By Christmas break of that sophomore year, I realized I was in love with her. It happened the night she coaxed me into going ice skating on a frozen pond near campus, something I'd never done in my life. I stumbled around like a newborn deer, and she glided on the ice like she'd been skating since birth. She'd laugh when I flailed, but she also never let me fall too hard. In the hush of that cold evening, as snow started drifting down, I noticed how her breath hitched, the little clouds of air puffing around her face. She looked luminous, and I couldn't stop staring. Right there, I mumbled something about how she made me want to be a better person, a less reckless soul. She smirked and said, "Don't go changing everything. I kind of like your strange sense of humor." We kissed that night, my first real kiss in a long time, and from then on I felt sure that if she'd have me, I wanted to build a life with her. We continued dating through junior and senior year, and while it wasn't always perfect, she had a fierce temper when stressed, and I had a tendency to close off whenever someone questioned my motives. We worked at it. We balanced each other out. At least that's what I believed. James stayed in the background, texting me occasionally, sometimes visiting on weekends. He met Veronica once or twice. I remember them chatting, but I never thought anything more about it. She seemed friendly enough, and he was on his best behavior. After graduation, Veronica and I jumped into the real world. She decided to shift from full-on pre-med to a master's in health administration. She said it offered better job flexibility. I was scooped up by a pharmaceutical firm that was looking for young blood. It felt like we were unstoppable, riding on the momentum of our success. When I proposed to her, nothing too fancy, just me on one knee at the same park bench where we first talked about the scar, she said yes through tears. We got married about 6 months later, right after she started her new job in a hospital's administrative office. That day, I remember thinking how lucky I was that fate had brought her to the campus bookstore line, that she'd spoken to me first, and that my past mistakes didn't define me in her eyes. It never crossed my mind that this unstoppable feeling might one day come crashing down around me. For now, I was hopeful, determined, and newly married to a woman who both intrigued and comforted me in equal measure. Life after the wedding felt like a rapid sprint and a slow burn all at once. We got our first apartment in a quiet suburb, close enough to the city so I could commute to my pharmaceutical job, but far enough that we had a little breathing room. Our neighbors were mostly older folks who'd invite us over for backyard barbecues. On weekends, Veronica and I would shop for little upgrades, throw pillows, new plates, that kind of thing. It was domestic bliss, at least on the surface. Within 2 years of tying the knot, we welcomed our son, Ethan. It felt surreal, holding this tiny human who was half me and half Veronica. I remember the first night home from the hospital, Ethan cried, and we stumbled around like clueless newbies trying to soothe him. Eventually, Veronica got him calm by swaying in the living room, half lullaby, half desperate whisper. I watched them from the couch, a weird mix of exhaustion and awe. In that moment, I thought, this is what life is about. Family, continuity, loving someone so much it scares you. I kept busy at work, climbing the entry-level rungs, while Veronica switched hospital departments twice in that first year. She said she wanted to find the perfect fit, somewhere she could make a difference. I admired her ambition, though I noticed she was quick to blame others for any friction she experienced. "They don't know how to run a team," she'd say about her boss, or, "They're too unorganized for my taste." I figured she just wanted to excel. She was goal-driven after all. When Sophie was born 2 years later, our little family felt complete. A boy and a girl, Veronica liked to call it the best of both worlds. For me, it was a whirlwind of diapers and formula, late-night feedings, and walking on tiptoe whenever the kids napped. Veronica took time off, but she seemed restless even during maternity leave. She'd watch TV or flip through hospital bulletins, sighing loudly whenever Ethan or Sophie started crying at inconvenient times. I was more than happy to pick up the slack, though balancing my growing responsibilities at the firm was tough. I was grateful for my parents, Henry and Elizabeth Gray, who lived only an hour away. They'd visit on weekends, bringing dinners and babysitting so Veronica and I could get a break. My dad would pat me on the back, telling me how proud he was. My mom would fuss over Sophie's tiny clothes and Ethan's favorite stuffed dinosaur. Those were good days. The house felt filled with warmth, like everything was exactly how it should be. Then one day, I got a text from James. We'd stayed in spotty contact. He'd gone on to work for a tech company in another state. "Hey," he wrote, "I'm coming back to the area for a while. Let's get together." I was surprised but happy. I told Veronica about it, and she just smiled politely. "Sure, invite him over," she said. When James showed up, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd bulked up a bit, traded his old baggy shirts for a slick button-down. He had that same easy grin, though, and it took me back to high school in a flash. We spent the evening catching up. He was fun with the kids, giving Ethan piggyback rides and gently bouncing Sophie. He joked about how fatherhood must be exhausting, but I noticed a genuine fascination in his eyes. Maybe he was proud I'd settled down into a solid life. Veronica and James talked politely at first, small talk about their careers. He teased her about being a hospital big shot, and she teased him right back, calling him Mr. Tech Mogul. The conversation flowed, but there was a weird tension I couldn't place. Maybe it was just me feeling odd about combining two different parts of my life. I told myself it was normal. After that night, James visited a few more times. He'd bring something for the kids like a puzzle or a set of crayons for Ethan. We'd crack open beers and watch a football game, or he'd come by on Sunday afternoon when Veronica was out shopping. It felt good to reconnect, to have my old friend in my grown-up world. But as time went on, I picked up on little things. The sly glances James shot me when Veronica said something sharp about her bosses, or the moments Veronica would mention how James was so easy to talk to about certain subjects. I tried to brush off any unease. After all, it was normal for a spouse to get along with a best friend, right? I was grateful she wasn't annoyed by him. Plus, with 2 kids and both of us working, the more support we had, the better. In the middle of all this, my job took a positive turn. My supervisor put me in charge of a small research team. We were working on improvements for an existing medication, nothing flashy, but it was a step up. That meant longer hours, occasional business dinners, and sometimes weekend tasks. Veronica understood in a practical sense, though I sometimes felt a flicker of impatience from her. "I handle the kids all day. Then you come home too tired to do anything," she'd say. I'd apologize, promise to carve out more time. Despite the juggling act, life still seemed decent. I wasn't getting any big red flags. Sure, Veronica appeared bored at times, or she'd make critical comments about how I took too long to get promotions. But I chalked that up to stress. The kids were healthy, we could pay the bills, we had a decent circle of friends. If that's not stability, what is? Yet I began noticing small changes. Veronica's phone buzzing late at night with messages she'd dismiss as hospital updates, or the way she got more critical of me for the tiniest things like forgetting to switch the laundry or picking the wrong brand of cereal. Then there were times James would drop by when I wasn't home, claiming he thought I'd be off early. One evening I found out he and Veronica had grabbed lunch together. I told myself they were just being friendly, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting a bit. Around that time, my parents stopped by to celebrate Ethan's 4th birthday. We had a small party, balloons, a homemade cake. James came too, bearing an elaborate toy truck for Ethan. My dad and he talked sports while Veronica bustled around the kitchen. My mom pulled me aside. "Honey, is everything all right with you and Veronica?" she asked gently. "You seem a little preoccupied." I forced a laugh, telling her we were just busy and tired. She didn't look entirely convinced, but she let it go. As the night wound down and everyone left, I sat in the living room, the kids asleep in their beds, Veronica scrolling through her phone. I realized I'd caught myself staring at her phone far too often lately, half hoping to see proof that everything was fine. Instead, all I saw was her locked screen lighting up with random notifications she never explained. I convinced myself it was paranoia. My last real confrontation so many years ago had led to me getting a scar. That taught me to keep a lid on my reactions and not jump to conclusions. So I waited, ignoring the small pit in my stomach that sometimes nagged at me. I reasoned it was just the stress of parenting and adulthood, but a tiny voice inside me whispered, "Pay attention. Something's off." In the weeks that followed, my unease grew stronger. At first, I tried to push it aside. Veronica had joined a new committee at her hospital, planning an upcoming fundraiser gala. She'd come home raving about the budget, how disorganized her co-workers were, and how she'd single-handedly whip things into shape. I nodded along, offering support. Yet the nagging feeling never left. Late one Tuesday night, I was tidying up the living room after we put Ethan and Sophie to bed. Veronica was in our bedroom, presumably folding laundry or browsing on her laptop. My phone buzzed. It was a message from James. "You around? Need to ask you something." I texted back. "Sure, what's up?" He replied right away. "Call me when you can." I walked into the hallway for some privacy. When he answered, I could hear the tension in his voice. "Hey, man," James said, "so I've got to be out of town for a bit. There's a conference for work." "Yeah?" I kept my tone casual. "Where you headed?" "Denver," he said. "I might be gone a few weeks. Listen, you mind if I swing by tomorrow to say goodbye to the kids? I mean, I'd like to see you too, obviously." I paused, feeling a flicker of confusion. It wasn't like him to fixate on the kids so strongly. Sure," I said. "But are you okay? You sound weird." He let out a short laugh. "Nah, just got a lot on my mind." Something in me wanted to ask more, but he quickly changed topics, rambling about last-minute flight arrangements. Eventually, we ended the call with a vague plan for him to come over in the afternoon. I shrugged it off, telling myself maybe James just felt close to Ethan and Sophie because he'd been around more. But the next day, he never showed. I tried calling, no answer. Hours later, I got a single text. Had to leave early. Sorry, that was it. So I let it go, chalking it up to typical last-minute changes. Still, it added to this creeping sense of something being out of place. That Friday, Veronica said she had to work late because of the fundraiser committee. I stayed home with the kids, watching cartoons, microwaving leftovers for dinner. Around 8 p.m., I decided to call the hospital line, half just wanting to hear her voice. The front desk told me the committee had wrapped up at 6. My stomach clenched, but I thanked them politely and hung up. Maybe she left the hospital to run errands, I told myself. No big deal. She finally got home close to 9. I kept my voice level as I asked how the committee meeting had gone. Ugh, exhausting, she said, rolling her shoulders. We were at it until the last minute. That was the moment a chill spread through me. She was lying straight to my face. I stared at her, uncertain whether to call her out. But something told me I needed more than just hearsay from a receptionist to confront her. Over the next week, I started keeping track of these inconsistencies. Times she'd say she was at the hospital, but no one there seemed to know. Emails or texts she'd quickly swipe away. I noticed a new password on her phone. She hadn't bothered to share it, though we used to have an open book policy. One afternoon, with the kids at my parents' house, I decided to do a little checking of my own. Veronica was at work. I drove to her hospital, parked across the street, and waited. If she came out around lunch, I'd see her. For 2 hours, I sat there, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, feeling ridiculous, but I never saw her. At some point, a coworker of hers, someone I recognized from a prior hospital event, exited the building, so I hopped out of my car and jogged over. I casually asked if Veronica was inside. He looked confused, then said, "I thought she was off today." So that was it. Proof. I stood by the sidewalk, heart pounding, wondering where the hell she was. Part of me wanted to text her right then, but I held back. Instead, I drove home, feeling numb, my head buzzing with possibilities. Could she have some personal issue she wasn't telling me? Was she stressed about something at home? That night, she got in after dark, claiming she was exhausted from meetings. I didn't let on that I knew she was lying. Something told me I should collect my facts first, not jump in half-cocked. I asked a few neutral questions. Any luck with the gala planning? Did you get lunch with coworkers? She gave me short, bland answers, eyes trained on her phone. I nodded, forcing a smile while my chest burned with suspicion. The next morning, as I was packing lunch for Ethan, my phone buzzed with a message from a colleague at work. It was a question about a file, totally mundane. But behind that text notification, I saw a missed message from James. "Dude, call me ASAP." That was from midnight last night. My stomach twisted. James had basically ghosted me for over a week, and now he wanted me to call him? Maybe he was still out of town. I stepped outside to phone him. It rang a few times. Then a voice I barely recognized said, "Hey." He sounded drained, or maybe just done. "I know it's early, but I have to tell you something before I leave again." My pulse spiked. "What are you talking about? Where are you even calling from?" He exhaled sharply. "Aiden, I don't want to do this over the phone, but I don't have much choice. I screwed up, man. He stopped, maybe choking on the words. "Look, Veronica and I—" My vision blurred. I felt my breath catch. It was like I already knew. "Say it," I murmured. She and I?" He swallowed loud enough for me to hear. "We've been messing around. I'm sorry. I know it's unforgivable. I can't hide it anymore." I just stood there in my backyard, the morning sun glaring in my eyes, Ethan inside watching cartoons, Sophie babbling. And in that moment, I realized the worst scenario I'd avoided even naming was true. My wife and my best friend had become something behind my back. My ears roared as James stumbled over more words. She said she was unhappy, told me you worked all the time." But I couldn't process anything else. I hung up. My heart was thrashing like I'd run a marathon. Veronica was inside, humming in the kitchen. The kids were playing with blocks, and I felt like I'd fallen into a slow-motion nightmare. Some part of me wanted to charge in, screaming, flipping tables. Another part of me wanted to collapse on the lawn, bury my head in my hands. But something else, something deeper took hold. A cold, sharp clarity. This was bigger than some bar brawl or petty scuffle. I wasn't that cocky kid anymore. My mind raced, but my body went still. And for the first time in my life, I felt that the anger I carried could be shaped into something more precise than just a punch. I took a deep breath, then headed back into the house, my expression calm. Veronica looked up from her phone. "Everything okay?" she asked, feigning mild concern. I forced the quietest nod. "Yeah," I lied, voice barely above a whisper. "Everything's fine." But I knew it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. And from that second on, something in me began to coil itself, a silent vow forming in the back of my mind. I'm not going to let this slide. Not again. I set Ethan's lunchbox on the counter, kissed Sophie's forehead, and gave Veronica the closest thing to a normal smile I could fake. And beneath that mask, the wheels of revenge started turning. I spent the next few days feeling like someone had flipped off all the sound in my life. Even when people talked directly to me, their voices seemed muffled, far away. I'd sit at the kitchen table with Ethan and Sophie, helping them color or handing out snacks, but my mind was stuck on one loop: James and Veronica. The more I replayed that phone call in my head, the more I felt an eerie calm seeping through me. I still remember James's shaky words. "We've been messing around. I can't hide it anymore." He apologized, tried to explain, but I hung up before he could make it worse. After that, I didn't confront Veronica right away. Instead, I watched her every move, the scheduled claims that didn't add up, the texts that made her smirk at odd moments, the way her eyes darted off if I even hinted at asking where she'd been. If I was going to do anything about this, I wanted proof so solid that neither of them could wiggle out of it. I wanted them cornered. You might think I was stewing in pure rage. Honestly, part of me was. But there was also a strange detachment. I was determined to gather evidence like I was building a case. Maybe it was the leftover discipline from my engineering background, this logical side that wanted every piece lined up. I had no intention of letting them gaslight me into thinking I'd imagined it. So I started small. When Veronica headed off to her hospital committee meetings or fundraiser planning, I began jotting times and places in a little notebook I kept in my jacket. I'd note the day, the excuse she gave, and how long she was gone. When I had the chance, I'd text a contact I knew at the hospital, an HR clerk I'd once met at a holiday party, and casually ask if Veronica was still in the building. Sometimes the clerk said yes, but more often she said no idea or that Veronica left early. Those were the moments I underlined in my notes, big and bold. I also made sure to check social media. Veronica had never been big on posting, but James was more active. Recently, though, his feed was quiet. Every once in a while, he'd like one of her older pictures stuff that was months or years old. It was weird. It felt like digital breadcrumbs, hints that he was scrolling back through her life. I took screenshots of everything, just in case. Late one night, after Veronica fell asleep, I snuck into the garage and fished around in a box where I kept old electronics. I found a small action camera that I used to attach to my bike helmet back in college. It wasn't fancy, but it had decent resolution. Then I went into the attic to find an ancient smartphone I'd replaced a couple of years back, still functional, just outdated. My plan was to set up vantage points in the house if I ever had a hint they'd meet here behind my back. I knew it might take time, but I was patient. The panic I first felt had hardened into focus. If I got them on video, there'd be no question who was in the wrong. The hardest part was acting normal around my children. They were so young, and I didn't want them feeling any tension. Each morning, I'd wake up early to help Ethan pick out clothes for kindergarten, then carry Sophie around the kitchen while heating up her oatmeal. I told myself that no matter how angry or betrayed I felt, I wouldn't let that poison my moments with them. When Ethan asked why Mom seemed so busy all the time, I smoothed his hair and said, "She's just got a lot of stuff to handle at work, buddy." Every lie I told him felt like a new splinter jabbing into my skin. Meanwhile, Veronica's demeanor shifted. She alternated between being oddly pleasant, like she was trying to cover her tracks, and downright critical when I gave the slightest indication I was suspicious. She'd snap at me over small things. "Why haven't you folded the laundry yet?" Or, can't you see we're out of milk? I bit my tongue. Because as soon as I flared up, that's when her eyes would narrow, like she was checking how close I was to the truth. I got the sense she wanted me to blow up so she could play the victim. So I stayed careful, calm. One afternoon, I got lucky. While the kids were napping, Veronica stepped out to run errands. About 20 minutes later, James's car pulled up across the street. From the living room window, I watched him glance at our house, then park at the curb almost like he was surveying the place. He sat there for a minute, on his phone, maybe texting her. My heart hammered as I realized they might be planning to meet up somewhere. Then he drove away. I took down his license plate number, the time, everything. It felt surreal, tracking my best friend like he was some shady intruder, but that's who he'd become. That evening, I placed a discreet call to a private investigator, someone recommended by a coworker who'd gone through a nasty divorce. The PI's name was Lucy Caldwell, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense tone. I told her I suspected my wife was cheating, that I needed conclusive evidence. Lucy listened, then said she'd check Veronica's patterns if I could provide her schedule, descriptions of the cars and any known hangouts. I hesitated over the cost, but part of me felt it'd be worth it. If this ever got messy, I wanted facts, time-stamped photographic facts. After giving Lucy the details, I hung up and stared at my phone. I half expected a wave of guilt, but instead I felt relieved. Another piece in place, another step closer to cornering them. I told myself that once I had everything lined up, I'd confront Veronica and James on my terms. I wouldn't be sucker-punched or blindsided. The memory of that old bar fight, the night that gave me my scar, still haunted me. I'd been so full of talk, so unprepared for real violence. This time I wanted control. In these days, I also spent a lot of time talking to myself internally, sorting out my moral lines. Did I want to hurt them physically? Part of me said yes, some primal wounded part that wanted them to feel as helpless as they'd made me. But another part insisted that my children's well-being mattered more. If things got out of hand, I'd risk losing the kids for good. So I promised myself to keep it measured, keep it strategic. What I couldn't predict was how high the pressure would get before everything blew up. Veronica grew bolder. She started coming home later, sometimes with the faint smell of cologne that wasn't mine. If I asked how her day had gone, she'd answer too quickly, like she was reading from a script. Meanwhile, Lucy emailed me snapshots. Veronica's car parked behind an unfamiliar building, photos of her stepping out with James, the two of them glancing around as if to be sure no one was watching. The date stamps, the times it all lined up with her so-called hospital meetings. My chest felt tight whenever I scrolled through those images, but I kept them, storing them in a secure folder online. Proof. One night, after the kids were in bed, I pretended to be working on a spreadsheet for my job, but really I was organizing the evidence. Veronica knocked on the office door and poked her head in. "Long day?" she asked, too casually. She wore an old shirt and sweatpants, looking almost like the Veronica I'd married, the one who used to curl up with me on the couch to binge-watch TV, except her eyes were cold. I forced a small smile. "Yeah, I've got to finish something for the lab," I lied. She nodded and left, no further questions. I remember exhaling in relief once she was gone. This secret war I was waging was draining, but I knew I couldn't back down. I had to see it through. It was like I was watching everything from a distance, plotting each move in slow motion. Deep inside, I felt the sting of betrayal, a swirl of heartbreak that made me wonder if our entire marriage had been built on illusions. But I'd press that pain down, at least until I could put the final nail in their coffin. Little did I know that the final blow-up would come sooner than expected, and it wouldn't be nearly as tidy or controlled as I hoped. I still pictured myself calmly confronting them with evidence, maybe filing for divorce on my own terms. But fate had other ideas. Because the moment you involve raw emotion in a plan, there's always a chance it'll explode bigger than you ever imagined. And in the back of my mind, I kept seeing the faint reflection of that scar in the mirror, a reminder that sometimes violence has a way of finding you, no matter how prepared you think you are. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because I'd decided to leave work a bit early, thanks to some flexible hours I'd banked. Veronica was supposed to be out running errands, and Ethan and Sophie were at my parents' house for the afternoon. Mom had offered to take them for a play date, giving me some quiet time. I pulled into our driveway around 3 o'clock. Usually by that time, our street was dead, most folks were still at work. A few retired neighbors might be puttering in their gardens. But as soon as I stepped out of my car, a prickle of awareness climbed my spine. Parked 2 houses down was James's car. He wasn't inside it. My heart rate skyrocketed. I quickly unlocked the front door. The house was still, but every sense was on high alert. I took a few slow steps down the hallway, noticing that Veronica's jacket was on the couch, tossed carelessly. My stomach churned. If James had shown up when no one was supposed to be home, I could guess why. My rational side told me to go back to the car, grab my phone, maybe call Lucy Caldwell to stake it out with me, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I set my keys on the table, trying not to let them rattle. I heard a faint laugh from upstairs Veronica's voice. Then a lower murmur that had to be James. My palms were sweaty. I swallowed hard, forced a long breath, and fumbled for my phone's camera. This was it, the chance to catch them red-handed. No more speculations or detective photos from afar. Step by step, I climbed the stairs, each footstep feeling like it thundered, though it was probably silent to them, distracted as they were. When I reached the landing, I followed the soft sounds to our bedroom. My door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, I caught a glimpse. Veronica in a bathrobe, James leaning against her, both laughing about something. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Everything slowed down, just like in a bad dream. For a split second, I remembered the vow to stay calm, to handle this logically. But the sight of them in our bedroom, so casual, shattered any composure I had left. My phone was in my hand, but I barely remembered to hit record as I shoved the door open. Veronica jolted upright, eyes wide. James spun around, fear flashing across his face. "What the—" James started, but I cut him off. "You're not even going to pretend, are you?" I hissed, lifting my phone so it caught them in the frame. My voice shook with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "Smile, you two. You wanted to do this behind my back, right? Well, here's your big reveal." Veronica's face turned pale. "Aiden, calm down," she said quickly, stepping forward. The bathrobe gapped at the chest, making me grit my teeth. She tried to grab my arm, but I yanked it away. "Don't touch me!" I spat. My phone was still recording. "Go on. Keep telling me you're in a meeting at the hospital." I swung my gaze to James. "And you some friend. Didn't you just say you felt guilty?" He held up his hands, stammering, "I'm sorry, man. It just—" "Shut up!" I growled, the words coming out sharper than I ever thought I was capable of. "You don't get to say sorry while you're standing in my house half-dressed with my wife." Veronica's expression shifted from shock to something hard. "Aiden," she warned, "you better put that phone down." She sounded more worried about me filming than the fact she'd been caught. My anger spiked. I glimpsed James edging toward me, maybe trying to calm me. "Stay back," I snarled. "You can't fix this, James." A flicker of panic crossed his face, then frustration. "Listen, let's talk like adults. We can go downstairs. What's left to talk about?" I nearly laughed, though no humor came out. I can't believe I wasted all that time gathering evidence when I can see it right here, plain as day. He inched closer, hands still up, but I saw the tension in his jaw. He glanced at my phone, probably worried about what I'd do with the footage. "Just put that down, okay? We messed up, but you don't need to—" The next part is hazy in my memory, like my body went on autopilot. I wanted to keep filming, but as James stepped in, something broke inside me. The camera angle dipped. My hand shot out before I even realized it, punching him square in the jaw. He staggered back, eyes wild with shock. Veronica screamed. I heard the phone clatter to the floor. James recovered faster than I expected, lunging forward to grab my wrist. We struggled, twisting, slamming into the dresser. A lamp toppled and shattered. Veronica was yelling something about calling the cops. It was chaos. My breath sounded animal, ragged as I wrestled with James. I could see the fear in his eyes, but he was also bigger than me. He pinned me against the wall, knuckles grinding into my shoulder. Pain shot through my arm. Somehow I broke free and swung again. This time my fist connected with his temple. He went down on one knee, cursing. I felt a violent surge of triumph, which was terrifying in its intensity. I rammed a knee into his ribs, hearing him gasp. Veronica grabbed my shoulder, nails biting in. I spun, nearly striking her by reflex, but I managed to stop my hand in midair. I locked eyes with her. The betrayal, the rage I saw, it reflected back at me in her face, though for different reasons. She stumbled away, then lunged for the phone on the floor. I realized she was trying to shut off the recording, maybe delete it. My mind snapped. She can't get rid of that evidence. I shoved past her, but not before James yanked me backward. We crashed into the bed frame and pain exploded in my side. I gasped, fighting to keep my balance. Suddenly, James was on top of me, throwing wild punches. One caught my cheek, dangerously close to my old scar. My vision blurred for a second. That old memory of the bar fight surged up, the helpless fury of being pinned down. Something in me roared to life. I twisted, used my legs to buck him off. He toppled sideways, and in that instant I hammered my fist down on him. I can't recall how many times, but it was enough to send him into a bloody daze. Veronica shrieked, "Stop! You're going to kill him!" She grabbed my arm again, but I shook her off. Rage pulsed through every vein. James was barely moving, his nose bleeding, lips split. My chest rose and fell like a bellows, and for a terrifying moment, I wanted to keep hitting him, to punish him for everything he'd ruined. But I forced myself to pull back. I staggered up, heart hammering, eyes darting to Veronica. She was staring at James, tears on her face, then glaring at me with a fury I'd never seen. "Get away from him!" she hissed. I stumbled back, vision swimming. My knuckles throbbed, and I realized with horror I might have gone too far. The phone was on the carpet, recording the aftermath in shaky camera angles. Veronica rushed to James's side, cradling his head. He coughed, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Some primal part of my brain screamed, "You have to get out of here!" But my eyes locked onto Veronica's. She whispered, venom dripping, "You're done, Aiden. You hear me?" I backed away, breathing in ragged gulps. Then, with trembling hands, I grabbed my phone from the floor. My entire body was shaking so hard I could barely hold it. The screen was cracked, but it had captured at least part of the brawl. James moaned softly and Veronica reached for her own phone, presumably to call 911. In that instant, I wondered if I should run. But it was my own house, my name on the mortgage. Why the hell should I run? So I just stood there, chest heaving, as she screamed into the phone for an ambulance. My mind raced. I have the footage, right? I have proof she cheated. But now it looked like I was the one who'd assaulted them. The reality of what I'd done started closing in. The kids, my job, my entire life was about to blow up, and I was the fuse that lit it. Still, part of me refused to feel regret. This was what they'd driven me to. As sirens wailed in the distance, I looked down at James's blood on my hands, at Veronica's tear-streaked face, and felt a cold, certain finality. Everything had changed in a matter of minutes, and there was no turning back now. I barely remember the ride in the back of the police cruiser. Flashing lights stained the interior red and blue while I tried to stop my hands from shaking. The officer who cuffed me was a stocky guy named Martinez, and from the moment he stepped into my house, he gave me that stern, "Don't try anything" stare. Veronica and James were still upstairs when he arrived. Another officer, a woman in her mid-40s, rushed past to tend to the bleeding. As Martinez led me out, neighbors stood on their porches, eyes wide. Some gasped at the sight of me in handcuffs. Others whispered among themselves. My mind flickered to Ethan and Sophie. What if they'd been here? The thought made me sick. They'd see their father dragged away like a criminal. Down at the station, the booking process felt surreal. They took my fingerprints, snapped a mugshot. My cheeks still ached, the bruises from James's punches throbbing. Every so often, I'd blink, trying to recall exactly how the fight started. But all that came was a blur of adrenaline and fists. At one point, an officer asked me if I needed medical attention, but I shook my head. James was the one who got the worst of it. Eventually, I was led into a small interrogation room. The walls were a dull beige, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. I sat in a metal chair, wrists still cuffed in front of me. A half hour crawled by before Martinez returned with a new face, a detective named Karen Foley, mid-50s, with sharp eyes that flicked over me like she was scanning for weaknesses. "Mr. Gray," she said, taking a seat on the other side of the table. "I'm Detective Foley. You want to tell me what happened in your house today?" I cleared my throat, scanning her face for any hint of sympathy. I came home early, found my wife with another man, I said bluntly. I confronted them. Things got heated. She nodded, scribbling in a small notepad. That man is James Carter, correct? Yes. My voice felt like gravel. He was my friend. Foley pressed her lips together. Witness statements say you punched him several times, kept going after he was down. Can you confirm that? I shut my eyes, recalling James pinned beneath me, the sick thud of my fists. I guess so, I managed. It wasn't planned. I snapped when I saw them. I lost it. She nodded again, no judgment on her face, just that cop neutrality. Do you have any proof of your wife's affair, or that Mr. Carter initiated the violence? I hesitated, remembering my phone. I recorded them, I said quietly. At least I was trying to. My heart sank as I realized the footage might show me delivering the final blows, overshadowing why I'd confronted them in the first place. She made a note, then slid a paper across the table. Your wife has filed a restraining order, claiming you're violent. You're aware of that? A chill ran down my spine. She did that already? Foley leaned back. She wasted no time. We got the call from the hospital she had Mr. Carter admitted with a broken nose, possible cracked ribs. She's claiming self-defense for him, says you attacked without warning. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. That's not true. I paused, grappling for words. Yes, I attacked him, but I had a reason, and it wasn't without warning. He was in my house, my bedroom. My hands clenched. I get that I shouldn't have done it, but she's the one who's been lying. Foley exhaled. I understand you're upset, but given Mr. Carter's injuries and your wife's statement, the DA might push for felony assault charges. If convicted, we're talking serious prison time. You need a lawyer, Mr. Gray. I stared at the table, the reality hitting me like a truck. It didn't matter that Veronica had betrayed me. As far as the law was concerned, I'd battered James to a pulp. Any moral high ground I hoped for was out the window. I was allowed one phone call. I reached out to a local defense attorney, Harold Brenner, recommended by a friend from my job. He answered, sounding groggy, even though it was only late afternoon. I explained I'd been arrested for assault, gave him the station details. He promised to come by as soon as possible. The next few hours were a blur of waiting, hunger gnawing at me, my body exhausted. At some point, an officer escorted me to a holding cell. It wasn't full, just me and two other guys who looked like they were picked up for drunk driving. I slumped on a metal bench, listening to them mumble about bail and crappy luck. My mind spun with images of Ethan and Sophie, wondering who'd pick them up from my parents, what Veronica would tell them. My chest hurt, not from James's punches, but from the thought that I might be cut off from my kids. That fear only intensified when Harold Brenner finally arrived. He was an older man with a mustache that twitched when he spoke. He pulled me aside and got the basic rundown. I'll see if we can arrange bail, he said. But your wife's statement is damning. If Carter backs her up, it's 2 against 1. There's talk they'll emphasize your violence in front of your children. They weren't even there, I cut in, voice trembling with frustration. Right, but it's the angle the prosecution will run with. We need to see how the evidence plays out. You mentioned you have some video from your phone? I nodded. Yeah, but it's mostly me confronting them. Some of the fight might be there, too. I fumbled, describing the phone's cracked screen. It might show them in the bedroom, might show them fighting me. I'm not sure. He sighed. Let's hope it's enough to show you were provoked. In any case, I'll do what I can, but be ready for an uphill battle. Your wife is painting a picture of repeated aggression on your part, claiming she feared for her safety. I felt my stomach churn. Repeated aggression? That's a lie. I've never laid a hand on her. Harold's expression softened. We'll sort it out in court. For now, keep your head down. Follow the rules. I'll try to get you out on bail, but no guarantees. He left to talk with the detective in the D.A. That night, they held me. A guard let me make a call to my mom, Elizabeth. The moment she heard my voice, she sounded panicked. Aiden, what's going on? The police came to your house. They took you away. Ethan and Sophie are here, but they're confused. Veronica said some horrible things. Are you all right? My throat tightened. Mom, I messed up. My voice cracked. I'll figure it out. Just take care of the kids, okay? Don't believe everything Veronica says. Please. We won't, she promised gently. Your dad and I know you, honey. We'll stand by you. Let me know when we can see you. I hung up, tears burning my eyes. For the first time, the full weight of what I'd lost hit me. My own home was now off limits because of that restraining order. Veronica had likely changed the locks, or would soon. My kids were with my parents, which was at least a small relief. But how long would that last? Midnight rolled around, and they still hadn't processed my bail hearing. I curled up on the cold bench, stifling the wave of hatred and regret. My fists were bruised, my mind racing with every worst-case scenario. Part of me clung to a thin thread of satisfaction James was in the hospital, probably not walking away from this scot-free. But the rest of me felt hollow, wondering if this was just the beginning of something much worse. Because if Veronica was set on destroying me, I had practically handed her the perfect weapon, and deep down I feared that my moment of violent rage had played right into her hands. I stood before the judge 2 days later. Everything about the courtroom, the polished wooden benches, the quiet murmurs of onlookers felt surreal. My attorney, Harold Brenner, had managed to arrange a preliminary hearing quickly, hoping to secure bail. Across the aisle, Veronica sat next to James, whose face was bruised and bandaged, nose swollen. My stomach twisted when I saw how he kept his eyes lowered, as if too ashamed to look at me. Veronica, on the other hand, stared me down like I was filth. I looked away, trying to preserve what little composure I had left. The district attorney laid out the charges. Felony assault. They mentioned the severity of James's injuries, the fact that it happened in front of the wife who claimed she felt threatened. Harold stood up to argue for me, explaining that I had no prior record, that I was a dedicated father, a stable employee. But the judge's face remained impassive. In the end, the judge granted bail, but set it high. My parents posted it, tapping into funds they definitely needed for their retirement. I swallowed my guilt, hugging them outside in the hallway as soon as they bailed me out. Mom whispered that Ethan and Sophie were still at their place, kept away from all the drama. Dad, Henry, just gave my shoulder a firm squeeze, eyes full of worry. The next few days blurred. Few days. I had to meet with Harold, gather documents, sign orders stating I wouldn't go near Veronica or James. That meant no stepping onto my own property, no contacting them except through legal channels. If I tried to see my kids, I had to do it under supervision or get the court's approval. The heartbreak of that nearly gutted me. The house I'd worked so hard for, the family I cherished overnight, it all felt out of reach. Meanwhile, the rumor mill at my job went wild. My boss, startled by the assault charge, asked me to take an unpaid leave until things were resolved. That meant my finances were in jeopardy. Dad offered to loan me more, but I couldn't stand the idea of draining their savings further. I bunked in my childhood bedroom, feeling like I'd fallen into some twisted version of high school all over again. Every morning I'd wake up early, hearing the kids stirring in the living room. Mom would feed them breakfast, let me peek in, but I was walking a legal tightrope. I couldn't risk hugging them if Veronica decided to twist that into a violation of the restraining order. So I kept my distance, staying behind a half-closed door while they giggled at cartoons. Tears stung my eyes more than once. At night I'd try to sleep, but my mind churned with guilt and anger. Sometimes I'd stare at my bruised knuckles, the raw scabs reminding me of that day I let my emotions take control. Then I'd think about James lying in a hospital bed, battered by my fists. Was I proud? Not exactly, but I wasn't sorry either, and that conflict tore at me. When the court date for the assault hearing arrived, Veronica upped the ante. Through her attorney, she filed for divorce and full custody of the kids, painting me as a dangerous man. The day I got served those papers, I nearly collapsed on my parents' porch. I'd known it was coming, but seeing it in black and white hammered home the finality of it. She was done with me, ready to move on as if our marriage had been a stepping stone to something else. In the midst of this chaos, I clung to one glimmer of hope, that phone recording. Harold got it analyzed, retrieved what data he could. Unfortunately, it showed some footage of me raging at James, which might not help my case, but it also captured the beginning, with me catching them in a compromising position. Harold said a skilled lawyer might argue provocation or heat of the moment. It could reduce the assault charge, maybe even get it lowered to a lesser offense. That was the best-case scenario. But the final blow came the night before a critical court session, when I was supposed to present the evidence. Veronica served a temporary custody order claiming I wasn't allowed to see Ethan and Sophie at all until the hearing ended. She used the fight, her fear, James's injuries, everything to paint me as unhinged. My own attorney cautioned me, "Don't do anything impulsive. Let's fight this in the courtroom." The heartbreak and isolation crushed me. My parents tried to reassure me, but I was consumed with thoughts of how quickly Veronica had turned lethal. For all her talk of love and family, she'd aimed to destroy me the minute she had the chance. A small, bitter voice whispered that maybe she'd planned it all along, stirring me into that final confrontation so she could come out the victim. The assault trial was shorter than I expected. Veronica testified, tears in her eyes, describing how I flew into a rage. She made no mention of the affair, insisting it was just a misunderstanding, that James was a friend offering emotional support. My teeth ground so hard I feared I'd crack them. James testified next, glancing my way only once. He said something about how he was worried for Veronica's safety, that he tried to de-escalate the situation. Lies coiled in my gut like a poisonous snake. I saw how the jury took in his battered face and Veronica's trembling voice. Their expression said enough. Poor victims, attacked by an abusive husband. My attorney showed the partial video clip of me catching them in bed. It didn't land the way I hoped. The prosecution argued it just proved I'd been enraged by jealousy, turning violent. They hammered home that assault was still assault, no matter the provocation. By the time it was over, I felt the outcome was written in stone. The verdict wasn't life in prison, but it was still devastating. Guilty of felony assault, sentencing me to serve a number of years behind bars. The exact length hammered my ears. 5 years, though I'd be up for parole earlier if I behaved. I could barely speak. Mom let out a muffled cry. Dad's face turned ashen. Veronica and James left the courtroom without a glance in my direction. Within days, I was processed into a state correctional facility. The first night in that bleak concrete dorm felt like plunging into a dark tunnel with no end in sight. My cellmate, a quiet older guy named Dennis, told me to keep my head down, do my time. I nodded numbly, still in disbelief that I was locked up while Veronica and James walked free. The hardest part was losing Ethan and Sophie. The court's order meant no direct contact until I finished my initial sentencing period, or unless I could negotiate some kind of supervised visitation down the line. Letters were allowed, but they were toddlers. They wouldn't write. All I could do was scribble shaky notes I wasn't sure they'd ever read. And so I spent my days in a blur of prison routines. Wake up at dawn, line up for meals, try to stay out of trouble. At night, I'd lie on the thin mattress, replaying that final confrontation, asking myself if there was some other path, some less violent route that might have saved me from this. But those thoughts only twisted the knife deeper. However, in my darkest hour, a sliver of possibility emerged. One afternoon, the prison chaplain mentioned a volunteer program for inmates to learn trade skills, something that might help me find a decent job once I got out. And not long after, a letter arrived from an old colleague, someone who said there might be an opportunity waiting if I kept my act together. It felt like a faint flicker of light in a long, dark tunnel. Back in my cell, I pressed that letter to my chest and shut my eyes, forcing myself to breathe through the pain. Veronica had won this round, taken my home and my children, left me behind bars. But I wasn't broken, not completely. I promised myself quietly and fiercely that I'd find a way to rebuild no matter how long it took, because there was more to my story than this prison cell. And one day, I'd show the world and myself that I could rise above the ashes she left me in. I remember the exact moment those prison gates slid open. The sky was overcast, a dull gray that matched my mood. Stepping outside felt surreal, like the air was heavier than before. I gripped the small paper bag that held my release papers and a few personal items. My breath came in slow, careful drags. 5 years, that's how long they'd kept me. Actually a little under that, but close enough. Between counseling sessions, manual labor details, and countless nights staring at concrete walls, I'd had too much time to reflect on the chaos my anger had unleashed. A guard led me to a small waiting area near the main exit. That's where Henry, my dad, stood, shifting anxiously from foot to foot. When he spotted me, his face lit up with a mix of relief and sadness. He opened his arms and I accepted his hug, feeling his breath hitch. "It's over, son," he whispered, voice cracking. "We're taking you home." I nodded, swallowing back a lump in my throat. On the ride back, we sat in silence for a while. I kept looking out the window, half expecting everything to be the same as I remembered. But it wasn't. The roads near the prison gave way to farmland, then suburbs that looked freshly developed rows of cookie-cutter houses that hadn't been there before. Eventually, we reached the old highway leading to my parents' town. Mom Elizabeth had waited at home, too nervous to travel. The house itself felt eerily unchanged. Same white siding, same front porch steps with a slight creak. When Mom opened the door, tears welled in her eyes. She pulled me into a trembling hug. "We missed you," she said, her voice thick. "You'll stay here until you figure out what's next, okay? No pressure." I stepped inside, the faint scent of cinnamon and old books washing over me. It was like stepping back in time, except I was dragging 5 years' worth of nightmares behind me. I noticed fresh pictures on the mantel photos of Ethan and Sophie, taller now, faces older. My heart squeezed painfully. I forced myself to look away before I started bawling in front of my parents. That first night, we had a quiet dinner at the kitchen table, meatloaf and mashed potatoes. My appetite was shot, but I forced down every bite, grateful for Mom's cooking. Dad asked if I wanted to see the kids soon, but I tensed at the suggestion. Legally, Veronica still had custody, and our relationship was complicated, to say the least. No, I realized, I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. After dinner, Dad cleared his throat. "Son, there's something else." He hesitated, exchanging a glance with Mom. "You've been gone a while. Veronica, she remarried." The words fell like stones in a pond, rippling out in the silent kitchen. I wasn't surprised some corner of my mind had already guessed, but hearing it stung. I gripped my fork so tight my knuckles ached. Who is he?" I asked quietly, though dread curled in my gut. Mom sighed. "His name is Paul Jackson. We don't know much about him, except he's a stable guy with a decent job. Financial consultant, I think." She lowered her gaze. "Ethan and Sophie live with them." I stared at the tablecloth, breathing carefully. So she'd moved on. Officially. My children were calling another man Dad, maybe. The ache in my chest sharpened. For a moment I fought the urge to rage against her all over again. But 5 years in prison had tempered that impulsiveness. Instead, I just nodded. Dad reached over, patting my shoulder. "We know it's hard. She cut off most contact with us after the trial. We only got to see Ethan and Sophie occasionally. Lately, though, she's let them visit a bit more. Paul brings them by sometimes. He's well. He seems decent." I forced a half smile. Guess that's something. Deep down, I felt hollow. I couldn't bring myself to ask how Ethan and Sophie viewed me now. Had Veronica turned them against me? Or did they even remember the old me? 5 years was a lifetime for a child. Later in my old bedroom, I stretched out on the narrow twin bed, the same one I'd slept in as a teenager. The soft mattress felt foreign after the steel bunk in prison. My mind churned. Veronica's betrayal had carved me open once. Hearing she'd remarried pressed the knife in deeper. But I wasn't the same reckless man who tore through the house in a fury. This time I'd handle my pain with a colder, more calculating approach. If I wanted to see my kids, I'd have to be strategic, show the courts I was stable, employed, no threat to anyone. I lay awake for hours, listening to the ticking clock. Eventually, I drifted off, dreaming of a little boy and girl running down a hallway, always just out of reach. Over the next few weeks, my parents tried to help me find my footing. I checked in with my parole officer, went through the usual hoops curfew, mandatory check-ins, drug tests, that sort of thing. It felt stifling, but better than prison. At least I could walk outside on my own terms, breathe fresh air without feeling caged. Every morning, I woke up early to scan job listings. My felony record complicated things, shutting me out of most positions related to my old pharmaceutical work. Interview after interview ended with polite rejections. The frustration built. I'd remember the conversation with an old boss who once hinted at opportunities overseas, but it felt like a pipe dream. Who in their right mind would hire a convicted felon in a foreign country? Then, one afternoon out of the blue, Hector Bowman, my former senior manager, texted me. He'd heard through the grapevine that I was out and that I needed a second chance. The message was simple. We have an opening in our French division. If you're interested, let me know. My heart thumped. I immediately called him back, and we talked for over an hour. Hector explained that the pharmaceutical branch in Lyon, France was short-staffed. They needed someone with a strong background in chemical processes, someone who didn't mind starting at the bottom rung. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a foot in the door. I almost laughed with relief, except a swirl of doubts hit me next. Could I even leave the country on parole? Would the company accept my criminal record? Hector asked me to forward any paperwork, and he'd do his best to smooth it over. It won't be easy, he admitted, but I owe you for the good work you did years ago. That night, I sat with my parents in the living room, explaining the potential job. They both looked stunned. Mom's eyes brimmed with tears, part joy, part fear. Dad, ever the realist, asked, "You'd move to France? That's thousands of miles away from everything and everyone." I rubbed my scar absent-mindedly. I can't do much good here with my record. If I go, it might mean a fresh start, a chance to rebuild. And maybe once I'm stable again, I can support the kids better. Mom nodded slowly. We'll miss you, but we understand. Over the next month, I jumped through legal hoops. I had to convince my parole officer, the company's HR, and the French authorities that I wasn't a flight risk. Thanks to Hector's connections and a mountain of paperwork, I eventually secured approval. The day I got the final go-ahead, a swirl of excitement and terror rushed through me. I could leave behind the suffocating memories of betrayal and prison, but it also meant leaving Ethan and Sophie even farther behind. I wrestled with that decision. Part of me felt like a coward. What kind of dad moves continents away from his kids? But every attempt I made to reach out to them met a wall. Veronica wouldn't let me speak to them directly, claiming I was unstable. My attorney told me it'd take a year or more to fight in family court for visitation rights, given my history. Sitting around unemployed with no stable income wouldn't exactly help my case. So I rationalized. If I built a new life overseas, proved I was more than my mistakes, I might stand a chance at custody, or at least meaningful visitation down the line. Finally, the day came. Mom and Dad drove me to the airport. We lingered at the security checkpoint, exchanging tearful hugs. Dad slipped a folded note into my hand. "Just a little message from me and your mom," he said, choking back emotion. "So you won't forget you still have people rooting for you here." The flight to France felt unreal. 8 hours of cramped seats, bad airplane coffee, and my mind spinning with what-ifs. I worried about language barriers, about someone in the new office judging me the minute they saw my criminal record. Yet there was also a quiet thrill under my fear, a sense that maybe I could start anew without the constant shadow of Veronica's betrayal. I arrived in Lyon with bleary eyes, stepping into a world where signs were in French and the hum of conversation danced with unfamiliar accents. Hector had arranged for a local driver to pick me up. The drive into the city was a blur of medieval rooftops, bustling cafes, and winding narrow streets that looked nothing like my Midwestern hometown. They set me up in a modest apartment near the pharmaceutical plant. It was small, a single bedroom, tiny kitchen, a living area with a balcony overlooking crowded buildings. But it felt like a mansion compared to my prison cell. My first week at the job was all about orientation, paperwork, safety training. I kept my head down, determined to show I wasn't there to cause trouble. Many co-workers were polite but distant, probably unsure how to handle the foreign guy with a record. I heard hushed conversations in break rooms, caught curious stares. But I shrugged it off, reminding myself I'd survived worse. One evening, after a long shift, I wandered into a nearby cafe for a quick meal. My French was limited to basic greetings, so I stumbled through an order of soup and bread. The waitress, a brunette in her 20s, offered a kind smile, correcting my French gently. We chatted a bit in English when she realized I was struggling. I found out her name was Juliette Lefebvre, a part-time student who worked evenings at the cafe. Something about her patient demeanor and soft laugh put me at ease. She didn't prod for details about my past, just seemed friendly and curious about why I moved to Lyon. We crossed paths again a few nights later. I was walking home trying to read a French pharmacy sign without much luck. She happened to pass by, recognized me, and we struck up a short conversation. She teased me about my accent, but not cruelly, more like she was amused by my attempts. I joked that I'd learn faster if someone corrected me every time I messed up. She chuckled and said, "Be careful what you wish for. I can be a tough teacher." That was the first time I felt a glimmer of real warmth in months, like maybe not everyone saw me as a criminal or a failure. Still, I kept my guard up. I knew better than to trust too easily. Veronica's betrayal had taught me that illusions can shatter fast. Yet day by day, France began feeling less like an alien land. I got the hang of the bus system, found a small grocery store that sold peanut butter at an outrageous price, but I needed comfort food. Hector occasionally checked in from the States, reminding me to keep my head down, focus on improving the plant's production metrics. Late at night, I'd lie on my stiff mattress, my phone in hand, scrolling through old photos of Ethan and Sophie, ones I'd managed to save or that my mom had sent me. My chest ached with longing. It felt wrong to be so far away, but what else could I do? Every step I took to stabilize my life might eventually help me prove I was worthy of being their dad again. That was my hope, anyway. One day, after a shift that left me sweaty from the production line, I noticed a note slipped under my apartment door, a neat, looping handwriting in French. I deciphered it haltingly. "I hope you're settling in. I'd be happy to show you around the city if you like. Juliette." Underneath, she left her phone number. I read it multiple times, a strange flutter in my chest. I recalled her gentle eyes, the way she corrected my French with that teasing smile. Something about the invitation made me realize I'd been holding my breath since the day I landed here, not letting myself exhale or truly live. Maybe it was time to breathe again, to risk a little hope. Though I clenched my jaw thinking about all that I'd lost, I typed a short text in reply, trying to keep my French simple. "Merci. Je veux bien découvrir la ville avec toi. Thank you. I'd like to see the city with you." Then I hit send, heart pounding, uncertain but strangely excited for the first time in forever. We started meeting up on weekends, me and Juliette, under the excuse of improving my French, but it quickly turned into more than a language lesson. She'd take me to old cathedrals, hidden courtyards, local eateries that served dishes I couldn't pronounce. Her eyes would shine whenever she introduced me to a new corner of the city. She'd watch my reactions, grinning at my wide-eyed fascination. At first, I kept my personal story vague, just telling her I'd moved from the States for a fresh start. She didn't pry too hard, although I noticed her curious glances. I wondered if she sensed the heaviness I carried, that undercurrent of guilt and longing. Slowly, I let slip small details. I had children but rarely saw them. I'd been through a divorce that left me broken. She nodded sympathetically, never pushing. One rainy afternoon, we ducked into a small art gallery. The place was nearly empty, the echoes of our footsteps whispering off the white walls. We stopped before a large abstract painting that looked like swirling blues and grays. Juliette tilted her head, studying it. "It's like a storm," she mused. "You can sense the chaos, but there's something beautiful at the core." I swallowed, thinking she could have been describing my life. As we meandered through the gallery, I noticed how my chest felt lighter in her presence. She had this knack for picking out the hidden details, whether in a painting or in a conversation. And for the first time in years, I felt truly seen, not judged. That evening, we returned to my apartment with umbrellas dripping. I offered to cook, though my fridge was mostly bare. We ended up improvising a pasta dish. While the noodles boiled, she perched on a stool, flipping through a French-English dictionary I'd bought. I teased her that my cooking skills were as limited as my vocabulary. She laughed, a warm sound that made the small kitchen feel cozy. Over plates of mediocre pasta, she asked softly, "You said you have children. Do they live with your ex-wife?" My throat tightened. I nodded. "Ethan and Sophie. They're in the U.S. with their mother." I struggled to keep the bitterness out of my voice. I made some mistakes. Lost custody. She reached across the table, touching my hand gently. "I'm sorry. That must be painful." I stared at her slender fingers on mine, feeling the weight of my secrets pressing down. Part of me wanted to lay it all out. The affair, the fight, prison. But I was scared she'd recoil, treat me like a dangerous criminal. In the end, I managed. It was complicated. I'm trying to rebuild now, prove I can be better. Her gaze held steady, no hint of judgment. "I'm sure you will," she said softly. "We all have things we regret, right?" The next moments passed in charged silence. Eventually, she squeezed my hand once more and let go. I felt a rush of gratitude, that maybe I'd found someone who could accept me as I was, scars and all. In the following months, my job at the pharmaceutical plant picked up speed. I was placed on a small team to streamline a manufacturing process for a new medication. My past experience in the States gave me an edge. I spent long hours analyzing data, tinkering with formulas, writing up proposals in English that my French colleagues translated. They started warming to me as results showed improvement. Production rose by a few percentage points, cutting costs. The manager, Pierre Marchand, noticed. After one meeting, he clapped me on the back and said, "Bien joué, Aiden, keep this up." Evenings were my sanctuary with Juliet. She'd stop by with takeout, or we'd explore local bistros. Sometimes we just walked by the Rhone River, the city lights reflecting in the water. Slowly, I taught her more English idioms, and she teased me with slangy French phrases I mangled. There were nights we dozed off on my couch, lulled by the quiet hum of traffic below. I never imagined I'd find comfort so soon, or that I'd trust enough to let my guard slip around her. But her unwavering kindness and gentle curiosity chipped away at my walls. Still, in my quietest moments, I longed for Ethan and Sophie. I'd catch myself glancing at kids in the park, their laughter triggering memories that cut deep. Juliet noticed my melancholy sometimes. She never pried, but she'd rest a hand on my shoulder in silent support. Eventually, I told her more. Not everything, but enough that she understood I'd been in prison for assault. The night I confessed, her eyes widened with shock, but she listened without interrupting. When I finished, heart pounding, she exhaled slowly. "You're not the same man who went to prison, are you?" I shook my head, voice raw. "I really hope not." To my relief, she slid closer, resting her head against my chest. "We can't change the past," she whispered. "We can only decide what to do with our present." A wave of emotion closed my throat. Her acceptance felt like a rare gift. I tightened my arm around her, letting the moment sink in. Because for once in my life, I sensed a real future opening up a chance to redefine myself on my own terms, not just as the guy who messed up. Time flew. Work successes mounted. Juliet and I grew closer, eventually becoming official. She gave me a key to her place, a small studio near the Old Town district. I introduced her to Hector, who grinned at me like a proud uncle. "I knew you'd get on your feet," Hector said, patting my shoulder. "Keep going. You'll do big things here." My French improved too. I'd never speak like a native, but I could hold my own at local markets, bantering with shopkeepers. I started sending small care packages back home to my parents' French candies, postcards. I enclosed short notes asking after Ethan and Sophie, though I knew they might never see them if Veronica stood in the way. It still hurt, but I was building a foundation now. Maybe someday they'd come to see it for themselves. It was nearly 3 years after my move to France that I realized just how much my life had transformed. I had a stable position as a project coordinator at the pharmaceutical plant. My coworkers respected me, even joked that I was the American who fixed our systems. With each small success, I felt the shadows of my past recede a bit further. By then, Juliet and I had married in a quiet civil ceremony, just a handful of friends from the plant and her immediate family, who accepted me with a warm, if cautious, embrace. Seeing her smile on our wedding day, a modest affair in a sunlit city hall, was enough to remind me I could still find love after everything I'd lost. She knew about Ethan and Sophie. We talked about them often, how we'd maybe visit the States someday, once my life was fully in order. Over time, we had 2 children of our own, Clara and Damien. When I first held Clara in my arms, her tiny fingers curling around my thumb, I had to fight back tears, thinking of how I'd missed so many of Ethan and Sophie's early milestones. It was bittersweet, this new chapter of fatherhood, weighed against the ache of not being there for my older kids. But I poured my heart into caring for Clara, and later Damien, vowing not to repeat my old mistakes. No more violence, no more reckless outbursts. I had a family to protect. As the years passed, my contact with my parents became more frequent. We video called often, though the time difference was tricky. Mom would grin as she saw Clara babble into the webcam, or Damien grin toothlessly. Dad would wave, eyes glassy with pride, telling me I was doing great. But in those calls, I also sensed an undercurrent of concern. They both seemed older, more worn. Dad sometimes coughed in a way that made me uneasy, but he dismissed it whenever I asked. I'd shuffle that worry aside, focusing on my life in Lyon. Work was going well. The managers even hinted at potential promotions, praising my skill at blending American efficiency with French know-how. At home, Juliet and I juggled a toddler and a newborn, sleep-deprived but content. My scar remained a visible reminder of the violent mistakes I'd once made, but I caught Juliet gazing at it sometimes with a soft, accepting smile. Once, I asked her if it bothered her, and she pressed her palm gently to my cheek, murmuring, "It's part of you, and I love all of you." Yet, a quiet tension existed in the back of my mind about my first two children. The few times I tried to call Veronica's number just to see if Ethan or Sophie would answer, she either blocked me or changed the line. My parents told me the kids were healthy, that Paul Jackson seemed like a decent father figure. A small pang of jealousy flared whenever I heard that. But no matter how many times I reminded myself I'd done the right thing by forging a new path, a sliver of regret still stung. If only I'd handled that confrontation with more control, maybe I'd be in their lives in a real way. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was late evening in Lyon. I'd just put Clara and Damien to bed. Juliet was washing dishes in the kitchen. My phone buzzed with a U.S. country code, my parents' house. I answered, expecting a routine check-in. But Mom's quivering voice told me at once it was serious. "Aiden," she whispered. "Your father, he had a heart attack." My head spun. "What? Is he—" I trailed off, dread squeezing my chest. "He's alive," she rushed to say, "but he's in the hospital. It's bad. I don't know what to do." I pressed my free hand to my forehead. Dad had seemed tired in our recent calls, yes, but I never imagined something like this. "I'll be there," I said firmly. "I'll catch the first flight I can." Mom let out a shaky breath of relief. "Thank you, honey. I'm so scared." After hanging up, I sank onto the couch, heart thumping. Juliet must have seen the look on my face because she hurried over, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Aiden, what's wrong?" I relayed the news, my voice hollow. She paled and pressed a comforting hand to my back. "You should go. I'll handle things here with the kids. Just keep me updated, d'accord?" Tears pricked my eyes as I realized the weight of this moment. I hadn't set foot on American soil since leaving that prison. Now I'd have to return, stepping back into the land of old wounds, old memories, and maybe seeing Ethan and Sophie face to face if they allowed it, all because Dad's heart might be giving out. Nodding, I stood, already mentally cataloging what I'd need for the trip: passport, plane tickets, a short leave from work. My mind raced with scenarios. Would Veronica cause problems if I tried to see my kids? Was Dad strong enough to recover? How would I keep my composure around the ghosts of my past? Juliet handed me her phone. "We can book something right now," she said, her voice soothing. "Tomorrow morning, earliest flight possible." I paused, scanning her calm features. She was offering unwavering support, no questions asked. My heart swelled with gratitude. "Thank you," I managed, voice thick. I'm sorry this is so sudden." She touched my cheek gently. "Family is never sudden, Aiden. Just go. Help your dad." Within an hour, we had a flight confirmation. I'd be leaving at dawn. My thoughts churned about seeing Mom in tears, seeing Dad hooked to machines. I couldn't shake the guilt of being so far away when he needed me. At the same time, an undercurrent of dread nagged me about stepping into Veronica's territory again. She'd married Paul, built a new life with my children. I'd only begun healing from her betrayal. Was I ready to face her scorn, or watch her sham of a happy marriage up close? Once the kids were down for the night, I packed hastily, tossing clothes into a small suitcase. I found Dad's old note, the one he'd slipped me on my release day, and reread it. It was a simple message about faith in my ability to rebuild, telling me not to give up. Tears blurred my vision. Juliet wrapped her arms around me from behind. "He'll be okay," she whispered, though neither of us could be sure. "And no matter what happens, you're stronger now. You'll handle whatever you find there." I exhaled shakily. "I just hope it's enough," I whispered. "I owe him everything after all he did for me." She kissed the back of my neck gently, and for a moment I closed my eyes, soaking in her warmth. Tomorrow I'd board that plane, stepping into a swirl of old heartbreaks and possible second chances. For a fleeting instant, the scar on my face felt like it throbbed, a reminder that the past always leaves its mark. But maybe this time, I could return with a steadier heart, guided by the love and stability I'd found here in France. And as the night wore on, I held Juliet close, mentally rehearsing how I'd face my father's hospital bed, my mother's anxious tears, and the looming presence of my ex-wife who once destroyed everything I thought I had. This was my chance to prove to them, to myself, that the man who walked out of prison was no longer the same one who nearly lost his soul in that violent rage. I arrived in the Midwest on a gloomy afternoon, a light drizzle coating the airport's parking lot as I walked toward the rental car. My thoughts were a mess, part relief to be there for my father, part dread at facing everything I'd left behind. The drive to the hospital felt strangely familiar. The same green highway signs, the same stretch of farmland, only now there were bigger subdivisions sprouting up on the edges. Each passing mile reminded me that while I'd been living a life in France, marrying Juliet, raising Clara and Damien, time had kept moving here too, with or without me. When I finally pulled into the hospital lot, my heart rattled in my chest. I parked and headed inside, hands stuffed in my jacket pockets to stop them from trembling. The sterile smell of disinfectant hit me as soon as the automatic doors whooshed open. Nurses bustled around, doctors conferred quietly in corners, and the faint beep of machines echoed through the hallway. My father Henry was somewhere in here, hooked up to those machines, fighting for his life. I asked the receptionist for his room number and hurried to the elevator. Floor 3, cardiac care unit. The ride up felt endless. Memories of my dad flashed through my mind. Him teaching me how to toss a baseball, him standing beside me at my wedding to Veronica, back when I believed that was my forever, and him visiting me during those bleak days before I left for France. Despite everything, he'd never abandoned me. Outside room 314, I paused. My mother Elizabeth was perched on a plastic chair by the door. Her eyes darted up, and when she saw me, tears welled instantly. "Aiden," she whispered, standing to embrace me. I held her tightly, feeling the frailness of her frame, a sign of how worried she must have been these past days. "How is he?" I managed. She swallowed, dabbing at her eyes. "Stable for now. The doctors say it was a massive heart attack. They ran a procedure to clear a blockage, but he needs rest, and maybe bypass surgery down the road." I exhaled, a rush of cold relief and lingering fear. "Can I see him?" She nodded, gesturing to the doorway. "He's awake, but tired." Stepping in, I spotted my father propped up on pillows, tubes running from his arm to a monitor that beeped steadily. He looked older than I remembered, thinner, as if these few years had added a whole decade. Yet when he caught sight of me, his mouth quirked into a smile. "You actually made it," he said, voice raspy. A wave of guilt crashed over me. "Dad, yeah, I'm here." I drew up a chair and sat, keeping my voice low. "Didn't expect it would be under these circumstances." He sighed. Neither did I. His gaze drifted to my mother, who hovered near the bed. "But I'm glad you came, son. I know it's not easy for you to be back." I glanced down, swallowing. How could I not? "You're my dad." Another pause, the hum of the machine filling the silence. "How are you feeling? Honestly." He shifted, wincing slightly. "I've been better. Doctors say it's a warning sign that I need to change my lifestyle, watch my stress, maybe retire sooner than later." Mom cleared her throat softly. "He's going to be okay if he follows the doctor's orders." The conversation dipped into talk of tests, medications, and possible rehab. I just kept nodding, still stunned by how fragile he looked. But a part of me felt a flicker of relief that it wasn't too late. Maybe he had a chance to recover fully if we handled everything right. Just as I was about to ask another question, a voice from behind made my stomach tighten. "Is this a bad time?" The tone was slightly sharp, laced with old resentment. I turned to see Veronica standing in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. Even in the loose sweater and jeans, she exuded that chilly confidence I remembered too well. "No," Mom said quickly, glancing anxiously between me and Veronica. "It's fine. We're just talking." My heart pounded. Seeing Veronica in person after so long felt surreal. She'd changed, her hair was shorter, a few subtle lines around her eyes, but the contempt in her gaze was the same. She stepped into the room, ignoring my presence, and addressed my dad. "Paul and I came by earlier, but you were sleeping. We'll come back tomorrow if that's okay." My father nodded, then cut his gaze to me. I cleared my throat, rising from the chair. "I'll give you two some space," I murmured, unsure if I'd burst from anger or keep it together. I turned to leave, but Veronica's voice stopped me. "You don't have to run," she said, though the sarcasm undercut any kindness. "Unless you think you're above a civil conversation." A flush heated my cheeks, but I forced calm. Deep breath, I reminded myself. "I'm not running. Just letting you talk privately with Dad." She lifted an eyebrow, then shifted her attention to him. "Anyway, I wanted to say hi. Paul's waiting downstairs with Ethan and Sophie." My heart jolted at the mention of my kids' names. Ethan and Sophie, teenagers now. My father's face flickered with tension. "Aiden just arrived," he explained quietly. "Maybe they can say hello to him." Veronica's jaw tightened. A muscle in her cheek twitched. "We'll see if they want to come up," she said in a clipped tone, as if it was some grand favor. Then she gave me a sweeping, critical once-over. "You look different, Aiden. I guess that's what a few years in Europe does, huh?" Bitterness threaded through me. She knew very well it was more than just Europe that changed me. It was prison, betrayal, heartbreak. But I refused to rise to her bait. "Yes," I said evenly. "We all change." She scoffed softly. "Right," and turned on her heel, heading back into the hallway. The tension in the room eased the second she was gone. Mom let out a shaky breath. Dad's gaze flicked to me again. "Just try not to fight," he murmured, exhaustion creeping into his voice. I gently patted his arm. "I didn't come here to fight. I came for you, Dad." And yet deep in my gut, I knew confrontation with Veronica was inevitable. Too much history lay between us, too many raw emotions for it to remain peaceful for long. For now, though, I swallowed my anger, focusing on my father's recovery. He needed calm, not drama. A few minutes later, my mom and I stepped out so Dad could rest. She took my arm, voice tremulous. "Aiden, you know how Veronica is, but your father's right. Please don't let her provoke you. He needs all the peace he can get." "I know," I said softly. "I promise, Mom, I won't do anything reckless." We made our way to the cafeteria, the hum of fluorescent lights and clatter of trays filling the silence. Over lukewarm coffee, she caught me up on life at home, the old neighbors who'd moved away, the local grocery store that closed down, how she and Dad had managed finances while his health started declining. Every so often, she'd glance at me, a question in her eyes. "Are you okay?" I tried to reassure her with half smiles and quiet nods. When we parted ways, I headed back to the parking lot. My plan was to find a nearby motel for the night, maybe a cheap place that accepted walk-ins. As I stepped into the elevator, though, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. I'm in the main lobby. Ethan." My breath caught. My son. He must have borrowed a phone or something. My pulse thundered as I texted back, "Okay. Coming now." This was it. The first face-to-face in years. My boy, once a little kid with a shy smile, was now a teenager. Tremors of excitement and dread warred in my stomach. I just hoped he'd want to see me really see me and not just recite Veronica's script. Stepping out of the elevator into the bustling main lobby, I scanned the crowd until I spotted him. He was taller, leaner, with the same dark hair I remembered, though now it flopped over his forehead in a messy style. My breath caught again. He resembled me more than ever. Beside him stood Sophie, arms folded, looking equally grown up. I approached cautiously, heart in my throat. Ethan glanced my way, uncertain. Then Sophie turned, and her expression flashed from guarded to something akin to curiosity. "Dad," she said softly. That single word shattered my composure. Tears pricked my eyes. "Hey," I managed, voice thick. And so began our first tentative reunion, one that Veronica's hostility might overshadow if I wasn't careful. But for now, I let myself feel a sliver of hope. Despite the tension in that hospital hallway, I sensed something shifting. Whatever happened next, I was determined not to let rage devour me again. I'd come too far for that. I suggested we walk outside to talk, away from the glare of fluorescent lights and curious stares. Ethan and Sophie exchanged glances before nodding. We ended up near a quiet corner of the hospital garden, just a patch of lawn, a few benches, and a cluster of carefully trimmed hedges. The drizzle had stopped, leaving the air cool and damp. I inhaled, bracing myself. We stood there in a loose circle, the two of them on one side, me on the other. My gaze kept flitting between them, trying to map the changes. Ethan's stance had a teenage slouch, and Sophie had grown taller, more confident in her posture. They were no longer the small children I'd once tucked into bed. "So, how's everything?" I asked softly, feeling ridiculous that everything was the best I could muster. Sophie shrugged. "Fine, I guess. Busy with school stuff. I'm in choir." She paused, sounding almost defensive, like maybe she expected me to be uninterested. But my heart warmed. "That's great," I said, meaning it. "Your mom mentioned you always loved singing. Didn't realize you joined choir, though. That's really cool." Her eyes flicked to mine, searching. "Yeah, well, I like it." She shifted her weight. Ethan cleared his throat, fiddling with a loose thread on his jacket. "So you're back? I mean, in town now?" My stomach clenched. "Just for a bit. Because of Grandpa. After he's stable, I'll likely return to France. I faltered, uncertain how much to share. "I have a life there, a job, a family." Sophie's brow furrowed. "You remarried?" Her tone held no accusation, just curiosity laced with something else I couldn't decipher. I nodded slowly, my voice low. "Yes, her name is Juliet. We have 2 kids, Clara and Damien. They're your half-siblings." The words felt surreal on my tongue. Part of me regretted not telling them sooner, but communication had been impossible with Veronica's blockade. Ethan's jaw tensed. "So you have a new family," he said, an edge in his voice that cut through me. "What about us? We were your family, too." My throat tightened. "You still are." I swallowed hard. "Look, I know it's complicated. I never wanted to leave. After what happened, I couldn't stay here. I was in prison, and then I got the chance to start over abroad. But that doesn't mean I stopped caring." Sophie looked away, arms hugging herself. "Mom always said you didn't want to see us, that you were happier far away." Anger flared momentarily at Veronica's lies, but I forced myself to remain calm. "I'm sorry she said that. It's not true. I tried contacting you, but she wouldn't let me through, and I had no legal grounds." I exhaled, words spilling in a rush. "I'd do anything to be involved in your lives if you'd let me." The siblings exchanged uncertain glances. A flicker of hope rose in me, seeing that they at least weren't shutting me out. But I could sense their confusion. Years of hearing only Veronica's side had shaped their perceptions. Ethan stuffed his hands in his pockets. "Mom said a lot of stuff about what you did. The fight, how you were violent, that you deserved to go to prison." The old sting returned, but I fought to steady my voice. "I won't deny I got violent. I hurt James badly. He was my friend, but he betrayed me. Still, it was my choice to lash out. I paid the price." My voice trembled. "I lost you two because of it." Sophie studied me, maybe looking for signs of aggression. "Do you regret it?" A heavy sigh shuddered through me. "Every day," I whispered. "I hate that it cost me time with you, and that it wrecked our family." Tears threatened, but I blinked them away. "But I can't change the past. All I can do is prove I'm different now." She nodded slowly, a crease forming between her brows. For a moment, none of us spoke, the hush of the hospital garden settling over us. A nurse pushing a wheelchair passed by in the distance, paying us no mind. Eventually, Ethan looked back at the building. "So Grandpa's going to be okay?" he asked, voice subdued. I cleared my throat. "That's what the doctors say. He'll need rest, maybe surgery, but they're optimistic." He nodded, tension easing slightly from his shoulders. "That's good." He opened his mouth as if to say more, then closed it. Finally, he mumbled, "Mom's probably wondering where we are." Sophie grimaced. "She was with Paul a minute ago." I recalled the mention of Paul Jackson. Supposedly a decent guy, stable, everything I hadn't been. The thought stirred a mix of resentment and odd sympathy. I remembered how oblivious I'd been when Veronica cheated with James. Now she had a new husband. Was she truly happy, or did old habits die hard? I forced my gaze back to my kids. "I know we can't make up for lost time overnight," I said gently. "But if you ever want to talk, I'm here. I'll be around for a while, visiting your grandpa." I hesitated, adding carefully, "I'd like to see you more if that's okay with you." Sophie's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but Ethan spoke first, voice low. I think we'd like that. Right, Soph?" He glanced at her, and after a second she nodded, though her expression remained guarded. "Yeah, I guess so," she said. "Just not sure how Mom will react." I grimaced inwardly. "I understand." My jaw clenched. I didn't want to provoke more drama with Veronica. But if my kids were open to seeing me, I wasn't about to back down. "We can figure something out, carefully." They nodded and we slipped into an awkward silence. Eventually, Ethan cleared his throat. "We should head back in, see if she's still waiting for us." I mustered a smile. "Of course. Thanks for talking to me. It means a lot." Sophie's features softened. "Yeah, well, it was nice to see you. Surreal, but nice." Ethan gave me a brief, hesitant half-hug that nearly brought tears to my eyes. Then they turned and headed back toward the building. I stood there, heart full of conflicting emotions. Guilt for being gone so long, hope that maybe we were forging a new path. Before I could dwell too deeply, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Where are you?" "Dad needs rest, but let me know when you'll come by tomorrow." I typed a quick reply, telling her I'd see them in the morning. As I made my way back to the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of Veronica by the hospital doors, arms folded, Paul standing beside her. He was a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard, wearing a button-down shirt. He looked polite, mild-mannered, so unlike James or my younger self. Veronica was speaking to him in hushed tones, tension rippling across her shoulders. Then her gaze flicked over and locked on me. Even at a distance, the chill in her stare was unmistakable. I turned away, the weight of old resentments pressing on my chest. Part of me wanted to confront her, demand she stop poisoning Ethan and Sophie's minds. But Dad's face floated behind my eyelids. He needed calm, not another fight. And as I drove off, my thoughts circled around how best to handle Veronica's hostility without sparking a war. Because if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that unbridled rage only led to ruin. This time I had to be smarter. Early the next morning, I dragged myself out of the cheap motel bed, rubbing exhaustion from my eyes. Sleep had been scarce. My mind replayed the conversation with Ethan and Sophie, the worry about Dad, and the simmering tension with Veronica. Over a stale cup of coffee in the motel's lobby, I resolved to keep my emotions in check. After all, I wasn't that impulsive man anymore. If Veronica tried to stir up drama, I'd maintain calm and do what was best for my father and my kids. At the hospital, I found Dad sitting up, sifting through some get-well cards. Mom hovered near the window, opening the blinds to let in a hazy morning light. They greeted me with tired but relieved smiles. "How are you feeling today?" I asked Dad, easing into the chair by his bed. He sighed. "About the same, but a little less pain in my chest." He gave me a wry look. "The nurses keep scolding me for trying to do too much." I managed a small grin. "Well, do what they say. We want you around for a lot longer." Mom patted his hand, then turned to me. "The cardiologist will come by later. Hopefully we'll have a clearer picture of his recovery timeline." I nodded. "I can stay as long as needed." My gaze flicked between them. I saw Ethan and Sophie yesterday. Briefly." Mom's eyes lit up. Oh, that's wonderful. Did it go okay? I shrugged, feeling both heartened and uneasy. Better than I expected, though they're cautious. They've heard a lot from Veronica, but they didn't shut me out, so that's something. Dad coughed softly, a hint of a smile curling his lips. I'm glad. They're good kids. A hint of sadness flickered in his eyes. Maybe he'd felt guilty, too, for not bridging the gap all these years. We spoke a while longer about random topics, Mom's recipe experiments, Dad's plans once he got discharged, my life in France. I carefully avoided the subject of Veronica until Mom finally ventured. She's been on edge since you showed up. Paul, too, but he seems, well, quieter. My father gave a hesitant look. Paul's a decent man. Works in finance, I think. He and Veronica married maybe a year after your sentencing. He's raised Ethan and Sophie as his own. He paused, clearing his throat. But sometimes, I sensed tension between them. My mind snagged on that. Tension? Like arguments? He shrugged, wincing. Could be, but I'm not sure if it's normal marital stuff or something else. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as none of my business. Another part remembered how easily Veronica had hidden her affair from me all those years ago. Once a cheater, always a cheater, the cynical voice in my head whispered. If she was messing around again, Paul Jackson might be the unwitting victim, caught in the same web I was. Just then, a soft knock at the door interrupted us. Ethan peeked in, followed by Sophie. My heart lifted at the sight of them voluntarily stopping by. Dad brightened, gesturing them closer. Hey there, you two. Morning. Sophie offered a shy wave while Ethan murmured, We were visiting Grandpa. Wanted to see how he's doing. They hovered near the foot of the bed, throwing me uncertain glances. Come sit, Mom encouraged, patting chairs on the opposite side. Your dad was just catching us up on France. For a moment, an uneasy silence settled, but then Sophie asked, So you speak French now? Like 100% fluent? I gave a modest shrug. I manage, but not perfectly. My accent's terrible. My wife teases me about it, I said with a small smile, noticing how Sophie's eyes widened at the mention of my wife. Ethan cleared his throat. That's cool, I guess. Must be weird living in another country. I explained a bit about the cultural differences, small cars, longer lunches, people greeting with cheek kisses. They listened intently, curiosity flickering in their expressions. It felt surreal, discussing everyday life with them, as if we were bridging a chasm one small detail at a time. Dad eventually dozed off, worn out from the conversation. The rest of us drifted into the hallway, not wanting to disturb him. Mom said she'd stay behind to keep watch, so Ethan, Sophie, and I wandered toward a small lounge area near the elevator. We perched on stiff chairs, the overhead lights buzzing faintly. Sophie fidgeted, glancing at me. So, how long are you staying here? I exhaled. As long as your grandpa needs me, I'm on a leave from work so I can be flexible. If you want, we can hang out sometime. Maybe grab lunch, talk more? The invitation felt bold, but I was determined. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. We'd have to ask Mom. She might not... He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Veronica wouldn't approve. Sophie chewed her lip. We could tell her we're visiting Grandpa again or something. She's busy right now anyway. I heard her mention a client meeting last night. My eyes narrowed slightly. Client meeting. Was she still in that same pattern, vague excuses, suspicious errands? I forced my tone to remain casual. So, she's working today? Ethan nodded. Yeah, she left the house early. Paul stayed behind. He shrugged. He's a nice guy. Always tries to keep the peace. Mom snaps at him sometimes, though. I suppressed a cynical laugh. Keeping the peace. I'd been that guy once, too, rationalizing Veronica's mood swings, blaming it on stress. Now I suspected something deeper might be at play, but I kept that to myself for the time being. We decided to exchange phone numbers, my trembling hand typing theirs into my cell. It felt monumental, having a direct line of contact without Veronica's interference. They seemed relieved, like they'd always been curious about me but hadn't known how to reach out. I promised not to push them into anything that would cause trouble at home, but they both seemed determined to see me again. Soon after, they said they needed to head out. Sophie had a choir practice. Ethan had a friend's project meeting. I hugged them goodbye, my chest tight with a jumble of longing and pride. Watching them leave, I couldn't help noticing how grown-up they appeared, navigating their own teenage schedules. Once they were gone, I stepped outside for some fresh air. Gray clouds hung low, threatening to rain again. My phone buzzed a message from an unknown contact. "Hey, this is Paul. Mind meeting for coffee?" My eyebrows rose. How did he get my number? Possibly from Ethan or Sophie. I hesitated, then typed back, "Sure. Where?" He replied with a cafe address a few blocks away, giving a time in an hour. The notion of Paul reaching out intrigued and unsettled me. Maybe he wanted to set boundaries about me seeing the kids, or he could be curious about the man Veronica once called her violent ex. Deciding I had nothing to lose, I walked over to the cafe, a small corner place with neon signs and a handful of booths. I arrived early, grabbed a seat by the window. 10 minutes later, Paul strolled in, glancing around until he spotted me. He offered a polite nod, then slid into the booth across from me. Up close, he looked tired, slight circles under his eyes. But he forced a friendly smile. "Thanks for meeting me. I wasn't sure you'd agree." I studied him. "I'm guessing you want to talk about Veronica and the kids." He inhaled deeply, fiddling with a sugar packet. "Yeah, mostly about the kids. I know you're their father, and they've been curious about you for a while." He paused, tone careful. "I'm not trying to replace you, Aiden, if that's what you think. But I've been there since they were little." His honesty surprised me. "I appreciate you taking care of them," I said, voice low. "I've been gone, so obviously someone had to step up." A faint nod. He sipped his coffee, then added, "I wanted to say I'm not opposed to them seeing you. But you know how Veronica can be." I nodded grimly. "Yes, I do." He hesitated, glancing at the door as though worried someone might eavesdrop. "Veronica, she's been acting off lately. Long hours, unexplained trips. I'm probably overthinking it. But there are times I can't shake the feeling she's hiding something." My gut tightened. "You ever ask her directly?" He looked away. "Yeah. She snaps at me or deflects, says it's work. But I've noticed her phone, the way she texts late at night." He shrugged, an uneasy laugh escaping. "I'm probably being paranoid." A chill skittered down my spine, memories of late-night messages, strange calls, Veronica's cunning excuses. History repeating itself? I forced a steady tone. "I won't jump to conclusions, Paul, but if you do suspect something, maybe you should keep an eye out. Don't let her blindside you like she did me." His jaw clenched. He leaned forward, dropping his voice. "I was hoping you might help me figure this out. I know it sounds nuts, but you know her better than anyone, especially how she behaves when she's lying." I couldn't believe what I was hearing Paul, essentially enlisting me in a search for proof that Veronica was cheating on him too. I stared at the steam rising from my coffee, thoughts swirling. After everything she'd done, part of me wanted to wash my hands of the entire mess. But another part recognized the same look on Paul's face I once wore, that desperate confusion, wanting truth, but fearing it. "I'll help," I found myself saying quietly. "I can't stand by if she's repeating her old patterns. But we need to be discreet for the kids, and for my dad's sake. He can't handle more stress." Relief flashed in Paul's eyes. "Thank you." We shook hands across the table, an unlikely alliance forming over the memory of a woman who'd burned me to the ground years ago. As I left the cafe, the ominous clouds finally let loose a drizzle, mirroring my mood. This time, though, I wouldn't let anger guide me. If Veronica was cheating again, I'd expose it the way I should have long ago, methodically, calmly, and with zero tolerance for her manipulations. The next few days brought a strange sense of déjà vu. I'd visit Dad at the hospital, help Mom fetch groceries, and discreetly text or call Ethan and Sophie about meeting up. Meanwhile, Paul and I communicated quietly about his suspicions. It felt surreal, walking the same tightrope as before, only this time, I wasn't the husband being cheated on. I was the ex, ironically aiding the new husband in uncovering the same betrayal I'd once suffered. We agreed on a plan. Paul would keep track of Veronica's comings and goings, noting suspicious work calls or evenings out. I had a contact from my old detective Fiasco, someone who'd done PI work still in the area. Let's call him Shane, a quiet guy who usually handled small-time investigations, mostly for divorces and custody cases. I reached out, explained the situation, and he agreed to help gather evidence. At first, I worried it was all a big leap, maybe Veronica was genuinely working late. But the more I saw her around the hospital or occasionally crossing paths at Dad's, the more my gut screamed otherwise. She was too smooth, too quick with excuses. One day, I overheard her telling Sophie she had a weekend conference in a neighboring city. Paul confirmed the hospital had no record of that event. Red flags piled up fast. Dad's condition, meanwhile, improved marginally. Each time I checked on him, he was more alert, though still frail. I avoided mentioning my snooping with Paul, not wanting to stress him. He was just happy I was spending time with Ethan and Sophie. They warmed up slowly, sharing bits of their lives, Sophie's upcoming choir performance, Ethan's interest in computer programming. We even snuck out to a diner once, laughing over milkshakes and burgers. My heart soared with each moment, though I noticed they still hesitated whenever the topic of Veronica arose. One Friday evening, Paul texted me, panic evident in his words. She's gone again. Said it's a client dinner. Doesn't add up. Shane's following her. My pulse pounded. I'd told Shane to keep me updated, but part of me dreaded confirmation that Veronica was indeed repeating history. I responded, "Keep calm. Let me know." Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Shane. I stepped outside my motel into the chilly night air. "Shane?" I answered, heart hammering. "Got her," he said tersely. "She's at a hotel across town, meeting some guy in the lobby." They went upstairs. I snapped pictures. The world slowed. I squeezed my eyes shut, not surprised, but still reeling. "So it's confirmed," I muttered. Paul was right. "Looks that way," Shane said. "What do you want me to do with the evidence?" I exhaled shakily, the memory of my own heartbreak roaring back. "Send it to me and Paul. We'll handle it." Ending the call, I steadied myself against a lamppost, forcing a long breath. It was happening all over again, Veronica hurting another man, another family. My mind reeled with the question, does she ever change? I immediately forwarded Shane's photos to Paul, along with a brief text. "I'm sorry." Paul called moments later, voice raw. "I can't believe it. She said she told me she'd never do this. Aiden, what do I do?" My throat constricted at the echoes of my past. "You confront her, but carefully," I advised, remembering how my own confrontation spiraled into violence. "Don't do what I did. Wait until you have a level head. We can catch her together if you want. Prove it so there's no denial." He swallowed audibly. "Tomorrow I'll give her a chance to tell me, but if she lies..." He trailed off, bitterness thick in his tone. "She's the mother of my stepkids, but I refuse to let her trample me." I nodded, picturing how I once felt the exact same betrayal. "I understand," I said quietly. "Just make sure the kids aren't around. They don't need to see that drama." He agreed, and we ended the call. That night I barely slept, visions of Veronica's cunning smile haunting me. The next day, we set our plan in motion. Paul told her he'd be out running errands. Meanwhile, Shane called to confirm Veronica was back at that same hotel, presumably for another illicit rendezvous. My stomach knotted, history repeating. But this time, I'd be damned if it ended in a bloodied mess. I drove to the hotel's side street, meeting Paul near his car. His face was pale, jaw clenched. I recognized that swirl of anger in his eyes, the same rage I once felt. "You sure about this?" I asked, scanning the quiet block. He shoved his phone in his pocket. "She's inside with that guy. Shane said they headed up to room 412, I grimaced. "All right. Remember, no violence. We catch them. We make it clear she's exposed. That's it." My heart pounded, recalling the last time I confronted Veronica. I'd lost everything. This time I wanted a different outcome for both Paul's sake and mine. We slipped through the lobby, eyes peeled for security cameras. The receptionist barely glanced at us. We took the elevator to the 4th floor, the tension crackling. Outside room 412, Paul hesitated, knuckles turning white. I can't believe this, he whispered, voice trembling with hurt and anger. Before he could act rashly, I rapped on the door, firm but not furious. The sound of muffled footsteps came from inside. Then the door cracked open to reveal Veronica, hair disheveled, wearing a blouse buttoned hastily. Her eyes widened in shock, flicking between me and Paul. "What?" she started, but her words fell away as Paul stepped forward, holding up his phone to show the incriminating photos. "Don't lie," he said quietly, voice quivering. "It's over, Veronica." She paled, then glared at me. "You again? You set this up, didn't you?" I shook my head, keeping my tone even. "You did this to yourself." Then my gaze slid behind her, spotting a startled man scrambling to grab his clothes. He froze, staring at us like a deer in headlights. Paul advanced a step, fists clenching. For a terrifying moment, I saw in his eyes the same murderous rage I'd once felt. Adrenaline surged in me. I won't let him make my mistake. "Paul," I said sharply, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Not here. Not like this." He swallowed, tears brimming. His voice cracked. "How could you, Veronica? We built a family together, or so I thought." She bristled, crossing her arms defensively. "Don't play victim, Paul. You're never home. Enough!" he snarled, heartbreak fracturing his composure. "Don't pin this on me." Then he drew a shaky breath, stepping back. "Go be with your boyfriend. I'm done." A ghost of a smirk twitched across her lips, but she quickly masked it with indignation. "Fine," she snapped, grabbing her purse. "I don't need you controlling me anyway." She shot me a venomous glare. "And as for you, you can't wait to see me miserable, can you?" I kept my voice cold. "I'm just here to prevent another disaster. Don't blame me for your choices." She hissed a curse under her breath, then slammed the door shut, presumably going back inside to gather her things. Paul stood trembling in the hallway, tears slipping down his face. Slowly, I guided him away from the door. We took the elevator in silence, my grip firm on his shoulder so he wouldn't do something rash. Outside, the sky was darkening, thunder rumbling in the distance. Paul's breath came in ragged gasps. "She's done this before. With her ex-husband, right? You were him." I nodded, heart aching with the memory. "Yes, and it destroyed me." I forced gentleness into my tone. "But don't let it destroy you. You still have a life. You have the kids, they care about you." He gave a tortured laugh. "They're her kids, biologically. She can poison them against me." I pursed my lips. "They're your kids in every way that counts. Don't underestimate their intelligence. They'll see the truth eventually." He sniffed, nodding dully. "What about you?" My gaze drifted up to the stormy sky. "I'll step back now, let you handle things. I've done my part." A swirl of relief and sorrow filled me. I'd shown Veronica's true colors, but at the cost of reopening my own wounds. At least this time, no blood was spilled, no father torn from his children by prison bars. Paul exhaled shakily, wiping tears with the back of his hand. "Thank you," he managed. "I'm sorry this had to happen." I shook my head. "Better you know now than later." Then, after a pause, I added, "Take care of Ethan and Sophie. They'll need you even more now." I left unsaid the fact that I still planned to be in their lives, if they'd allow it. He nodded, a haunted look in his eyes. "I will." With that, we parted ways, each climbing into our cars, the rumble of thunder underscoring the finality of Veronica's downfall. As I drove back to the hospital to check on Dad, my pulse slowly settled. The woman who'd once shattered me had repeated her pattern, but this time, I'd walked away without letting rage consume me. A grim satisfaction flickered in my chest. She loses again, I thought. No more illusions, no more hiding. Dad's room was quiet when I slipped in. He was asleep, Mom dozing in a chair. I sank into a corner seat, drained, but oddly at peace. For all the chaos, I'd kept my promise not to resort to violence. And that meant I could still stand tall before Ethan and Sophie, show them a father who'd learned the cost of anger. Eventually, I'd return to France, but for the moment, I was here, forging new bonds with my children, supporting my parents, and leaving Veronica to reap the consequences of her lies. There was no neat bow to wrap around it, no final flourish of vengeance. just the quiet knowledge that I'd done right by Paul and by the man I'd once been. And that, in its own way, felt like true closure. I woke up to a crisp morning sky outside my motel window, a light haze lingering over the rooftops. It had been a few days since everything with Veronica blew up since Paul and I confronted her at that hotel. The fallout was still reverberating, but I was doing my best to keep the drama away from Dad, who needed to focus on recovering. My phone chimed with a text from Mom, letting me know Dad was up for visitors again. I tossed on a jacket, grabbed the car keys, and headed out. At the hospital, the halls were more familiar than I cared to admit. I'd memorized the layout, the vending machines that occasionally ate your dollar, the muted paintings lining the corridors, the pattern of scuff marks on the floor. A new nurse at the front desk recognized me by now and gave me a polite nod. I always managed a small smile in return, despite the swirl of worries in my head. Dad Henry was propped up on pillows when I entered his room. He looked a shade better than before, color slowly returning to his cheeks. Mom Elizabeth sat in a chair by his bed, flipping through a magazine. She lit up when she saw me. "He's having a pretty good day," she said. "His tests went well this morning." Relief unfurled in my chest. "That's great." I approached the bed, studying Dad's tired smile. "You look less pale, Dad." He grunted softly. "Always the charmer," he joked, but I could see a faint sparkle in his eye. "They're talking about releasing me in a week or so if I keep improving. I'll have to do some rehab at home, though." I nodded, taking a seat. "I can help out however you need. No rush for me to go back to France yet." And it was true. I'd already arranged an extended leave with my employer. Hector, my old manager, was understanding when I explained the family emergency. Juliet had also insisted that I stay as long as it took, promising to handle everything with Clara and Damien. I glanced at Mom, who was listening in silence. Over the last few days, we'd had deep, heartfelt talks, moments in which she admitted feeling guilty for not intervening more when my life fell apart. I'd reassured her it wasn't her burden to carry. Now, in Dad's room, she gave me a warm, knowing look, as if grateful we were all still standing, still fighting for each other. Dad shifted, wincing slightly. "The doc says I need to keep stress to a minimum, or I'll find myself right back here. Then we'll make sure to keep everything calm," I replied. But even as I said it, I thought of Veronica's meltdown and the uneasy aftermath. According to Ethan and Sophie, she'd moved out to stay with a friend. Or maybe the same guy she'd been caught with, leaving Paul to hold things together. It was a quiet kind of chaos swirling around us. We chatted about mundane things, the local news, a barbecue spot that recently shut down, the weather turning colder. Then Dad cleared his throat. "So where do you stand with Ethan and Sophie? I've seen them around, but they don't talk much about the details." I exhaled, glancing at Mom, who watched me intently. "We're good, I think. They've been texting me. We meet for lunch sometimes, just an hour here or there to catch up. They want to be part of my life, but they're worried about Veronica's reaction." A small frown tugged at Dad's mouth. "Veronica's always had a knack for controlling the narrative," he said, his voice full of regret. "I'm just glad they're seeing your side now." I offered a tentative smile. "Me too. I'm trying to give them space, but it feels like we're growing closer every day." At that, a spark of hope warmed my chest. Even though years had been lost, maybe we were finally weaving together a bond that would last. Mom set her magazine aside, leaning forward. "I'm so proud of you both for trying to bridge that gap. And Aiden, I've been thinking—" She exchanged a look with Dad. "Your father and I are, well, we're not young anymore. If you do end up going back to France for good, we'd love to visit, see where you live." A wave of gratitude hit me. "Juliet's been asking for that. She'd love to show you around. And Clara and Damien have been bugging me about meeting their grandparents." I paused, emotion tightening my throat. "We can plan it once Dad's strong enough to travel." He gave a faint chuckle. "That might take a bit, but it's a nice goal to work toward." For a moment, we lapsed into a calm silence. The hospital's steady hum encased us. I felt the fragility of life pressing in Dad's close call with a heart attack, the precarious bond with my children, but also the resilience. We'd all stumbled through heartbreak and betrayal, but here we were, forging a quieter, sturdier future. When it was time for Dad's physical therapy, I excused myself, stepping into the hallway to let the staff do their work. Leaning against the wall, I sent Juliet a quick text. "He's doing better. Love you." Within minutes, she replied, "Love you too. Hugs from Clara and Damien." The warmth of those words soothed me, reminding me that once Dad recovered, I'd have an entire life to return to a life built on trust, not deception. I turned, ready to head down to the cafeteria for a coffee, when I spotted Sophie at the end of the corridor, scanning the room numbers. I called her name, and she glanced up, giving a small wave. "I was coming to see Grandpa," she said, stepping closer. "Is he okay?" I nodded. "Physical therapy right now." "Therapy? Maybe wait about 10 minutes, then you can go in." She glanced at the closed hospital door, then back at me. "I guess I'll hang out here with you." Her voice held that teenage mix of shyness and new confidence. We leaned against the wall, and I asked her about school. She mentioned a choir concert next month, face lighting up as she described the songs. Eventually, her eyes flicked to mine, and she lowered her voice. "Moms, we haven't seen her much. She took off after that argument with Paul. She left a note saying we could stay with him if we wanted, or follow her if we liked." She paused, anger creeping into her tone. "It's messed up that she's making us choose." My chest constricted. "I'm sorry. I never wanted you caught in the middle," I said softly, remembering how Veronica's manipulations once pitted me against everyone. "But you're old enough to know your own mind." Sophie frowned, tears brimming. "Ethan and I decided to stick with Paul. He's been there for us." She hesitated. "But we still want you. Both of you. Does that make sense?" A tender ache spread in my chest. "It does, and I'm glad. I think Paul's a good man, and I'm thankful he's cared for you when I couldn't. But I'd like to be more present if you'll let me. Even if it's part-time or on video calls once I'm back in France." She nodded, the tension in her face easing. "That sounds good. Ethan says he wants to learn some French words, maybe visit you someday." Her eyes sparkled with the hint of possibility. I swallowed hard, unexpectedly moved. "That would be amazing. Juliet and I and Clara and Damien would be thrilled." She offered a tentative smile, then glanced at Dad's door. "I'm gonna wait in the lounge. Text me if Grandpa's done with therapy." "Sure," I said softly, relieved that she was confiding in me. As she walked away, I stood there for a moment, absorbing the weight of her words. They wanted me in their life, and they were also staying loyal to Paul. In the quiet hush of that hospital hallway, it felt like a small victory, a sign that love could expand to accommodate more than one father figure. My phone buzzed again this time, a message from Ethan. "Hey, Dad, any updates on Grandpa?" It still felt surreal to see Dad on my screen, but I'd never get tired of it. I typed back a quick note, letting him know Grandpa was in therapy, stable. After I hit send, I realized my heart was lighter than it had been in years. Slowly, I paced back toward the elevator for that coffee. As I did, a fleeting memory surfaced of me pacing similar hallways in the past, filled with rage or hurt. Now, that bitterness had transformed into something gentler, an acceptance that I couldn't change the past, but could shape the present. Dad's near-death scare was the jolt we all needed, reminding us how precious time was. Soon, I'd return to the hospital room to share the good news with Sophie, let her visit Grandpa, and quietly plan the next steps. Because once Henry was strong enough, I intended to keep my promise, opening my home in France to them, forging a new future where none of us had to pick sides or live in fear of Veronica's manipulations. I was done with secrets and heartbreak. There was only forward, one careful step at a time. 2 weeks later, Dad was finally discharged. I drove him and Mom home in their old sedan, making sure to avoid potholes so he wouldn't jostle too much. The day was sunny and brisk, and he breathed in the fresh air with a look of relief. "I never want to see another hospital ceiling again," he joked weakly as I helped him inside. Mom fussed over his pillows, his blanket, the water bottle on the side table. Dad just waved a dismissive hand. "Elizabeth, I'm not bedridden." But the fondness in his eyes showed he appreciated the attention. For the first couple of days, I stayed at their house, preparing simple meals, soups, soft foods. The doctors had recommended a heart-friendly diet, so I read up on low-sodium recipes, exchanging tips with Mom. We fell into a quiet rhythm, me taking Dad to follow-up appointments, Mom double-checking his medications, Dad grumbling about the blandness of everything. But beneath the everyday fuss lay a renewed sense of closeness. Even if the circumstances were far from ideal, we were a family again, in our own messy way. In the late afternoons, I'd step out onto the back porch for a breath of fresh air. Their backyard was small, a single oak tree and a weathered bench. I'd sit there sometimes, calling Juliet on video chat. The time difference meant she was usually wrangling Clara and Damien for bedtime, but she always answered if she could. Those calls lit up my day, seeing Clara's wide grin, Damien's toddler babble, and Juliet's comforting voice, softly scolding me to get enough rest. We talked about the plan for Mom and Dad to visit France eventually. Dad needed a couple more months of cardiac rehab, but the goal was set. Juliet cheered the idea, offering to clear a spare room for them. One late afternoon, while I was in the backyard, Ethan and Sophie showed up unexpectedly. I heard the squeak of the gate, turned, and saw them standing there holding a pizza box. Sophie smiled shyly. "We figured Grandpa might like a slice if he's allowed," I chuckled. "Well, maybe just a small piece. Low sodium?" "Probably not, but let's see how we can manage." I ushered them inside, calling for Dad, who was perched on his recliner. He lit up at the sight of them, though he feigned a scowl at the pizza. "You kids trying to sabotage my new diet?" he joked, and they laughed, crowding around him. Mom beamed from the kitchen doorway. While Dad and the kids chatted, I stepped aside, heart full. There was a time I feared we'd never see a scene like this again, so ordinary, yet so precious. Ethan snuck me a grin, whispering, "We got extra veggies." Figured that's healthier, right? I patted his shoulder, touched by his thoughtfulness. After dinner, we settled around the living room. Dad talked about his therapy exercises, how the nurse, Gloria, was a drill sergeant in disguise. The kids teased him gently. I watched them, realizing how effortlessly they'd stepped into each other's lives. For all the heartbreak Veronica had caused, the kids had emerged stronger, shaped by adversity but not broken. When conversation lulled, Sophie cleared her throat. "So, Dad," she said, looking at me, "you're eventually going back to France, right?" I nodded, meeting her gaze. "Yes, once Grandpa's stable enough that he doesn't need me here every day." Her eyes darted to Ethan. He nodded as if encouraging her to continue. She drew in a breath. "We were talking we'd like to visit you there, see your home, meet Juliet and, our half-siblings." She swallowed. "Mom might freak out, but we're old enough to make our own decisions soon, especially once I'm 18 next year." My pulse pounded. I hadn't expected them to bring it up so soon, but joy welled in me nonetheless. "That would mean the world to me," I said, voice barely steady. "We can figure out the logistics, maybe plan for your vacation time if that works with your schedule." Ethan's face brightened. "Yeah, a trip overseas. I've never even been on a plane." He rubbed his hands together, half excited, half nervous. "Think we can handle the culture shock?" "You'll do great," I assured him, brimming with pride. "I'll be there to guide you, and Juliet's an awesome tour guide. She loves showing newcomers around." Dad, listening from his recliner, chimed in. "You kids better go. This old man plans on going too, once I get the doctor's approval. We'll all converge on Aiden's place in France. Make a family reunion out of it." Mom smiled, wiping a stray tear. "Yes, it's time we meet our grandchildren over there. Clara and Damien. Oh, I can't wait." The kids laughed softly, and I realized we were painting a picture of the future, a big gathering in France, bridging the divides that once felt permanent. My throat constricted with gratitude. After everything, maybe we could be a family in ways none of us had envisioned. Later that night, after Ethan and Sophie left, Dad retired to bed, exhausted but in good spirits. I lingered in the living room, Mom tidying up the plates. She glanced my way, expression wistful. "It's nice to see you all planning things, so hopeful," she murmured. "I remember when you were behind bars and I worried we'd never have a normal conversation again." I walked over, gently taking the stack of plates from her hands. "We might never be fully normal," I said, setting them on the counter. But this is close enough. Thank you, Mom, for sticking by me, for letting me come back when I needed to. She reached up, patting my cheek. We love you, Aiden. I'm just thankful to see the kids open their hearts, too. Then she lowered her voice, eyes shifting. And what about Veronica? Is she going to make trouble about them traveling to France? I grimaced. I'm not sure. She's preoccupied with her own mess right now, but legally, once they're 18, they can make their own choices. Until then, I'll handle it carefully. Mom nodded, relieved. Yes, carefully is best. Her gaze flicked to a photo on the wall, a snapshot of me and Veronica from years ago, which she hadn't yet taken down. It's odd how life twists around, but I guess all we can do is move forward, right? A small, somber smile curled my lips. Right. I gently lifted the photo frame from the wall, turning it face down on a side table. No need to dwell on that old version of our story. Mom gave a faint nod, and we stood there quietly, sharing the weight of memories that no longer defined us. In the hush of that moment, I felt something settle in my chest, a certainty that we were on a better path now, one forged by honesty, regret, and the promise of something new. Before I retreated to the guest room, I sent Juliet a quick text update. Dad's home. Kids want to visit us. We might have a full house in Lyon soon. Her reply came swiftly. Yes, bring them all. Our door's open. I stared at those words, heart swelling with affection. In the days to come, I'd continue helping Dad with his rehab, watch the kids grow braver about forging relationships with me, with Paul, and possibly, in time, with each other. Bit by bit, the nightmares of the past receded, replaced by these small but profound victories. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt hopeful that this fragile unity might actually hold. Summer arrived earlier than usual, bathing the neighborhood in a humid warmth. Dad's cardiac rehabilitation sessions had gone smoother than expected. He was already walking short distances around the block, supervised by me or Mom, sometimes even Sophie if she visited. Ethan joined once, joking that Grandpa was outpacing him. Dad chuckled, but also seemed invigorated by the younger generation fussing over him. We spent a lot of our time in the living room, sorting out the details for a future trip. Mom kept a little notebook, scribbling lists of things they'd need, passports, comfortable walking shoes, maybe some phrase book to help them with basic French greetings. Dad made a show of rolling his eyes at her over-planning, but I knew he found it endearing. By mid-June, Dad felt confident enough to manage short day-to-day tasks without constant supervision. I debated heading back to France soon. My leave from work wouldn't last forever, and I missed Juliet and the kids fiercely. But each time I brought it up, Dad or Mom would wave me off. A few more days, at least, Dad would say. I need you here until I'm 100% sure I won't keel over. I teased him about being dramatic, but deep down, I relished the extra time. Because every day, Ethan or Sophie texted me something new, Sophie excited about a new choir piece, Ethan complaining about a tough coding project. Sometimes they dropped by with groceries or dinner. Occasionally, Paul would swing by as well, quiet but cordial. Veronica was nowhere to be seen. According to Sophie, she was holed up at a friend's condo, rarely contacting them except via terse messages. They didn't seem to miss her presence, which spoke volumes about how far she'd drifted. One humid afternoon, Ethan and Sophie both turned up unexpectedly, hauling a large duffel bag. What's that? I asked, eyeing the bulky thing. Ethan grinned. We found some old family albums in the attic. Figured Grandpa might want to walk down memory lane and maybe you'd want to see them too. My heart squeezed. Sure, I said quietly, touched by their initiative. Inside, I found pictures from my childhood me at age 7, missing front teeth, chasing a dog in the backyard. Dad in his 30s, hair thicker, leaning against his old truck. Mom in a floral dress, smiling wide. And then pictures I'd almost forgotten of Ethan and Sophie as babies, me cradling them, Veronica half in the frame. I felt a pang at the sight of her face, remembering fleeting moments of happiness before betrayal. We spread the albums across the coffee table. Dad eased into his recliner, adjusting his glasses. Oh, look at that, he murmured, pointing to a snapshot of me around age 10, fishing pole in hand, Dad beside me. That was out at Lake Mirror. You caught a sunfish, remember? I chuckled. Yeah, I was proud as if I'd landed a shark. The kids laughed softly. It felt surreal to see my younger self, so naive and carefree. If only I could have whispered to that boy how life would twist and turn. A few pages later, we found wedding photos. Me in a dark suit, Veronica in a simple white gown, my parents beaming in the background. The kids grew silent, glancing at me to gauge my reaction. I forced a small smile. That day it felt perfect at the time. Sophie chewed her lip. I never realized you looked so happy together. Mom doesn't keep these photos around the house anymore. I exhaled, thinking of how quickly illusions crumble. We had good moments, I admitted, voice quiet. It wasn't all lies. A flicker of sadness rose, but also a sense of closure. I could look at these pictures now without the old anger flooding me. Dad cleared his throat, flipping the page to pictures of Ethan as a baby, swaddled in a blue blanket. He let out a fond chuckle. You screamed bloody murder until your dad held you. That's the only thing that calmed you, he told Ethan. Ethan blushed slightly, but a smile tugged at his lips. Guess I was a handful. I gently tapped a photo of Sophie toddling around in a pink outfit, me kneeling beside her. You used to reach for my hand every time you stood up? I teased Sophie, who rolled her eyes playfully. We spent over an hour sifting through memories, laughter mixing with bittersweet sighs. It felt like a quiet act of healing, bridging the gap between the past we lost and the future we were building. By the end, even Dad looked emotionally spent, but in a good way. That evening, after Ethan and Sophie left, Dad and I sat on the porch while Mom cleaned up. He stared at the sunset, pastel pinks and oranges smeared across the sky. You know, he said softly, I used to pray every night that you'd find your way out of that dark tunnel. Prison, divorce, it was a lot. I swallowed, recalling those grim days behind bars. Yeah, sometimes I didn't believe I'd ever have a life again. But I did, thanks to the job in France, and Juliet. I trailed off, voice thick with gratitude. And you and Mom never gave up on me. He rested a hand on my shoulder. You never gave up on yourself either. That's the main thing. A long pause followed, the chirp of crickets rising around us. Then Dad sighed. I want you to go back soon, son. I appreciate you staying, but I don't want you losing your job or neglecting your other family. I'm healing, and I can manage with your mom's help. Emotion tugged at me. I'll head back when I'm sure you're strong enough. But I understood his point. My life in France was waiting. He chuckled softly. In the next week or two, okay? The kids know how to reach you, and I'll be up on my feet in no time. Then we'll plan the big trip overseas. Give me a few months, and maybe by the holidays we'll all show up on your doorstep demanding croissants. A grin broke across my face. Deal. We might even have a turkey for you, though it might be a French version. We lapsed into companionable silence again, gazing at the darkening sky. A gentle breeze rustled the trees, carrying the scent of fresh grass. I thought of Juliet, picturing her tucking Clara and Damien into bed, reading them a good-night story. Soon, I'd be there beside her again, and eventually my parents and maybe even Ethan and Sophie would join us for a visit. The idea warmed me from the inside out like a patchwork family finally finding its shape. When I bid Dad good night, he clasped my hand. Thank you for everything, he murmured, voice breaking slightly. I almost died, Aiden. This extra time feels like a gift. I squeezed back. I'm just glad you're still here, Dad. He gave a watery chuckle, letting go. Go get some rest. Inside, Mom was folding laundry, humming softly. She paused when she saw me. Everything okay out there? I nodded. Yeah, just some heart-to-heart with Dad. He wants me to head back soon. A wistful look crossed her face. We'll miss you, but he's right. We can't hold you here forever. I sighed, feeling both relief and sadness. I'll stay a bit longer, make sure he's stable. Then I'll fly home. Home. The word tumbled in my chest. I had two homes now, in a sense. But the stronger pull was across the Atlantic with my wife and children waiting. Mom brushed my arm gently. He's proud of you. We both are, and we'll be along as soon as he's good for travel. I want to see your Juliet in person, see how lovely she is. I mustered a grin. She's amazing. You'll love her, and she'll love you. In that moment, I realized how far we'd come from a fractured family overshadowed by betrayal to a place where we could dream of gathering around a table in France, sharing croissants and stories. The final piece would be Ethan and Sophie stepping into that new life as well, and for the first time, I truly believed it was possible. The day of my flight back to France dawned crisp and sunny. I awoke in my parents' guest room, heart thrumming with mixed feelings. Dad's color looked much better, and his latest checkup gave him a solid thumbs up. Mom fussed over his breakfast, making oatmeal spiked with fresh berries. I triple-checked my suitcase, ensuring I wasn't leaving anything behind. Around mid-morning, Ethan texted, "We're on our way." They'd insisted on coming to see me off, which melted my heart. Sure enough, half an hour later, I heard a knock on the door. Sophie and Ethan strolled in, arms laden with small pastries from a local bakery, just a tiny goodbye gesture. "Clara and Damien would love these," Ethan said, handing over a box filled with donuts and eclairs. "If they don't get squashed in your luggage." I laughed. "I'll do my best. Thanks, guys." Their presence spoke volumes. We'd come a long way from the initial awkwardness. Now, seeing them grin at me, I felt a pang that I wouldn't be around for their daily milestones. But we'd keep in touch, and hopefully, the future visit was on the horizon. Dad ambled out of the bedroom, leaning on his cane. The doctor had recommended it for stability during these first weeks at home. Mom hovered behind him, arms raised in case he wobbled. He caught Ethan's eye. "Grandson, you better help me keep this fellow in line," he teased, nodding at me. "Don't let him go forgetting us the minute he steps on foreign soil." Ethan smirked. "I got your back, Grandpa." Sophie rubbed her arms, expression turning thoughtful. "Dad, I want to say thanks for everything. We know it's been complicated, but we're grateful you stuck around for Grandpa." She hesitated. "And for us." I reached out, gently touching her shoulder. "I'll always stick around for you in whatever way I can. You have my number, my email, everything. Call me anytime." She nodded, swallowing back emotion. Ethan slipped in for a brief, awkward group hug, which ended up with Dad, me, Sophie, and Ethan all tangled in a messy circle, laughing. Mom snapped a quick photo on her phone, eyes shining. Then it was time. We piled into Dad's sedan. Dad insisted on coming along for the ride, though I ended up driving. Mom claimed the passenger seat, while Ethan and Sophie crammed into the back. The drive to the airport felt surreal, a repeat of my arrival, but flipped. Now I was departing with a heart lighter than it had been in years. At the terminal curb, I parked and hopped out to grab my suitcase. We formed a small huddle on the sidewalk, the overhead speakers crackling with boarding announcements. Travelers rushed by, dragging wheeled luggage, oblivious to the quiet drama of our family goodbye. Dad shook my hand firmly, then pulled me into a one-armed hug. "See you soon, son. Count on it." Mom's hug came next, tearful. "We'll come as soon as his doctor gives the okay. I can't wait to meet the rest of our family." The word family made my chest tighten with warmth. Sophie and Ethan lingered last, exchanging uncertain glances. I offered them both a gentle smile. "Remember, my door is open. Whenever you're ready." Sophie nodded, stepping into my arms for a hug. "I can't wait to see your life there," she murmured. "And to meet my siblings." She said it softly, as if testing the word on her tongue. Ethan, shifting on his feet, gave me a firm handshake that turned into a clumsy hug. "I'll text you. Maybe we can set up a video call next week so I can practice some French phrases." I grinned. "Absolutely. We'll get you speaking like a local in no time." And that was it, an exchange of promises, a swirl of hope. I waved them off as I entered the terminal, each step feeling momentous. At security, I turned for one last look, catching a glimpse of Dad leaning on his cane, Mom holding his arm, Sophie and Ethan on either side. They waved in unison, a mismatched quartet that had somehow come together despite it all. The flight itself passed in a haze of airplane hum and in-flight movies I barely paid attention to. My thoughts drifted to Juliet, to Clara and Damien, imagining their excited faces at the airport in Lyon. My phone, switched to airplane mode, held countless photos from these past weeks, a digital testament to everything we'd rebuilt. When we finally landed and I cleared customs, my heart pounded with anticipation. I found Juliet by the arrivals gate, flanked by Clara bouncing on her toes and Damien fidgeting with a small toy car. The second they saw me, they broke into wide grins. I hurried over, wrapping them in a hug so tight Clara squealed. Juliet laughed, pulling me close for a warm kiss on the cheek. "You're home," she whispered. I exhaled, the weight of thousands of miles and a tumultuous family saga behind me. "I missed you all," I admitted, voice thick. "How's everything been?" As we walked to collect my luggage, Juliet updated me on the everyday routines, Clara's progress in preschool, Damien's new obsession with dinosaurs. My chest swelled, love and relief coursing through me. Once in the car, I let out a long sigh, glancing at the French skyline. "It's good to be back," I murmured, leaning my head against the seat. At home, the kids tugged me excitedly through the front door, showing me drawings and little craft projects. I managed to hand over the battered pastry box from Ethan and Sophie, which Clara and Damien devoured with glee. Juliet shook her head in amused disapproval at the sugary treat, but winked, knowing it was a piece of my other world bridging into theirs. Later that evening, once the kids were in bed, Juliet and I curled up on the couch. I told her about Dad's recovery, how we'd gone through old family albums, how Ethan and Sophie seemed ready to be part of my life again. She listened, eyes bright with empathy. "I can't wait to meet them," she said softly, snuggling closer. "We'll show them all the best spots in Lyon, yes?" A surge of gratitude welled in me. "They're excited, and my parents, too. Might be a full house soon." I laughed a little, imagining it a chaotic, wonderful mix of grandparents, half-siblings, blending cultures and histories. Juliet leaned her head on my shoulder. "I love it. Our door is open." She paused, eyes searching mine. "How are you feeling, truly?" "It couldn't have been easy, facing everything again, Veronica. Your father's heart attack." I considered her question, recalling the hospital halls, the tense confrontation with Veronica, the tender moments with my parents and kids. "I feel content," I answered slowly. "We're not perfect, but we're healing, and that's enough." She pressed a tender kiss to my temple, a silent affirmation. Together we gazed out the window at the lights of Lyon twinkling in the distance. For a moment, the old scar on my brow tingled, a reminder of the violence that once tore my life apart. But that was another man's story. I was forging something new, a future where my children knew they had a father who wouldn't give up, where my parents could see me thriving, and where betrayal no longer had the final say. We sat there, content in the quiet hum of the apartment, dreaming of the day Henry and Elizabeth arrived, wide-eyed and curious, stepping off a plane into an unfamiliar land. Of Ethan and Sophie joining them eventually, exploring French streets, tasting pastries that put the ones from home to shame. A swirl of languages and laughter, bridging all the hurt with each step we took together. And in that hush, I closed my eyes, letting gratitude wash over me. Because for once, life felt like it was in motion for all the right reasons: love, redemption, and the slow, sure promise of family. Weeks melted into months. Work demanded my attention, yet I found myself glancing at my phone constantly, checking for updates from Dad's health or messages from Ethan and Sophie. Dad's strength returned steadily through his rehab program, and the moment his doctor cleared him for limited travel, my parents booked flights to Lyon. Juliet squealed when I told her we spent the next few days child-proofing the guest room, rearranging furniture so Dad wouldn't strain himself. Clara and Damien scrambled around, excitedly calling it Grandma and Grandpa's room. The day their plane landed, I stood at the same arrivals gate I'd passed through not long ago. My heart pounded with anticipation. Finally, I spotted them emerging through the glass doors, Dad clutching a small suitcase, Mom scanning the crowd until she saw me. I waved, a wide grin splitting my face. They hurried over, laughter mixing with tears. Dad looked a bit tired from the long flight, but his face glowed with wonder at the foreign signs and announcements in French echoing in the background. In the car, Mom marveled at the highways and architecture, while Dad chuckled, pointing out every tiny difference from the States. "Look at those compact cars," he mused, "and the street signs. They're all in kilometers." When we reached my apartment, Juliet and the kids were waiting at the doorway. Juliet's smile lit up the entire space as she warmly greeted my parents. Her English was decent, though she occasionally slipped into French. Mom tried to respond with a few halting phrases she'd practiced on the flight. Dad merely beamed, shaking her hand gently, exchanging pleasantries. Clara peeked out from behind Juliet, then rushed forward to hug me, eyeing her new grandparents curiously. Damien trotted over with a toy dinosaur, thrusting it at Dad. "Roar!" he exclaimed, as if introducing himself. Dad chuckled, bending slightly to accept the plastic creature. "Well, hello there, buddy." His voice wobbled with emotion, probably from seeing a grandchild he'd only glimpsed in photos. Mom exchanged wide-eyed smiles with Juliet, stepping inside to explore. The living room, though modest, was flooded with afternoon sunlight. French doors led to a small balcony offering a view of the city. Mom gasped softly. "It's so beautiful here, Aiden," she murmured. "I never imagined." Dad slowly sank onto the couch, letting out a contented sigh. "I'm a bit wiped out, but this is incredible." He patted my hand. "I'm proud of you, son. It's clear you've built something good." My chest tightened with a swirl of pride and gratitude. After so many mistakes, seeing my parents here, safe and smiling, felt surreal. Juliet ducked into the kitchen to prepare coffee and tea, motioning for me to help. I stepped away, letting my parents take in the atmosphere. In the kitchen, I gave Juliet a quick, grateful peck on the cheek. "Thank you," I whispered. She chuckled, brushing flour from her hands. "I haven't done anything yet, but your parents seem lovely." "You'll see just how lovely they are when Dad sneaks an extra pastry," I teased, reminded of his diet. We shared a laugh before returning to serve refreshments. Over the next few days, we transformed into mini-tour guides. Even though Dad's stamina was limited, we planned short outings, a gentle walk along the Rhone, a quick visit to a century-old cathedral. Mom gawked at every bit of architecture, snapping photos on her phone. Dad, though occasionally winded, soaked in the ambiance like he was trying to memorize each detail. One afternoon, we found ourselves at a cozy cafe near the old town. Dad insisted on sampling a local pastry. Juliet warned him to watch his sugar, but he flashed her a disarming grin. "Just a bite," he promised. The cafe bustled with chatter in French. Mom giggled at the menu, stumbling over the words. I translated, pointing out safer options for Dad's heart. Meanwhile, Clara and Damien fussed over the excitement of grandparents at the table, passing crayons around to keep themselves entertained. At one point, Dad reached across the table, gently grabbing my wrist. His eyes shone. "Aiden," he said, voice low so only I could hear. "Thank you for inviting us, for letting us see this life you've built." He glanced at Clara and Damien, then at Juliet, who was explaining pastry names to Mom. "I never thought I'd travel overseas, see my son happy in a place like this. It's a dream come true." Emotion clogged my throat. "I'm just glad you're here," I managed. "Recovering. Enjoying. That's all I wanted." He squeezed my hand and let go, returning to his pastry sample. Inside my chest, relief mingled with joy. There had been a time I believed my parents might never forgive my violence, that I'd never stand in the same room as them without guilt overshadowing me. Yet here we were, forging new memories in a city half a world away from the pain that once bound us. A few days into their trip, I got a text from Ethan and Sophie. "We want to come soon." My heart soared. I showed it to Mom and Dad, who exchanged excited looks. "Then we'll extend our stay if they manage to come," Mom insisted. Dad nodded vigorously, though I warned them not to push themselves too hard. Ethan and Sophie's schedules might not allow an immediate trip, but the seed was planted. On their final night before returning home, we hosted a small dinner at my apartment. Juliet prepared a simple French dish with fresh local ingredients, ratatouille, with crusty bread. We squeezed around the dining table, conversation weaving between French and English. Clara and Damien chattered about random kid stuff, Dad shared stories of me as a child, and Mom rattled off observations of French culture that amused Juliet. Laughter bubbled up, mixing with the aroma of tomatoes and herbs. When the plates were nearly empty, Dad rose unsteadily, and I moved to help him, but he waved me off. Clearing his throat, he tapped his glass gently. "I'd like to say something." We fell silent, watching him. He looked at me, then at Juliet, then Mom, his voice trembling. "A few months ago, I nearly died. I never thought I'd get to see my son, my grandchildren, in this new life he carved out. But here I am, and I'm grateful beyond words. Thank you all for having us, for giving an old man new memories." Tears blurred my vision. I sensed Juliet's gentle hand slipping into mine under the table. Mom dabbed her eyes. Clara asked in a small voice, "Why crying, Grandpa?" Dad gave a choked laugh, shaking his head. "Happy tears, sweet girl. Very happy tears." After dinner, we hugged goodbye. Their flight left early the next morning, so we arranged for a taxi to pick them up. I walked them to the door, helping with their suitcases. Dad's gaze flicked to me one last time. "Promise to come see us soon. Maybe bring the kids. We'll keep working on Ethan and Sophie to join the next big get-together." I nodded, a lump in my throat. "Absolutely. We'll plan it. Count on it." When they stepped into the taxi at dawn, I stood on the curb, watching it vanish into the quiet Lyon streets. Juliet slipped an arm around my waist, leaning her head on my shoulder. The early morning sky glowed with the first hints of sunrise. A tender ache filled me, a blend of parting sadness and overwhelming fulfillment. I pictured Dad's heartfelt toast, Mom's joyful face, Clara and Damien bonding with them over dinner, and the knowledge that Ethan and Sophie were next in line to experience all this. It felt like a cycle of healing had turned, each step bridging the wounds left by betrayal, anger, and loss. As Juliet and I strolled back into the building, the sun crested over the rooftops, bathing the street in golden light. For a moment, I paused on the threshold, letting the warmth wash over me. I closed my eyes, remembering the old heartbreak. Then I exhaled, opening them again to the present, a new day in a city that symbolized second chances. My father's gratitude echoed in my mind. Thank you all for giving an old man new memories. And quietly, I thanked life for giving me the chance to rewrite my story, surrounded by a family that refused to let the past define us. A few years had slipped by in what felt like a heartbeat. My parents' visit to France had been a joyous whirlwind, and in the time since they flew back home, life steadily resumed its new rhythm. Juliet and I settled into our everyday routines, me at the pharmaceutical company in Lyon, she balancing her cafe hours with raising our two kids, Clara and Damien. We still video called with Mom and Dad often, relishing how Dad's health continued improving. And every few weeks, I'd hop on another call, usually late at night, due to the time difference with Ethan or Sophie. Their voices, deeper and more sure, reminded me how rapidly they were inching toward adulthood. Professionally, I found myself on the cusp of something big. My department had been developing a new line of specialized medication, one that required intricate testing, global collaboration, and potential travel to present our findings. My boss, Pierre, pulled me aside one morning, his expression eager. "Aiden," he said in French-accented English, "upper management is eyeing you to lead an expansion project. It'll be intense, a promotion, more responsibilities, and significant travel. Are you interested?" His proposition caught me off guard. A surge of excitement warred with caution. I was no longer the man who could chase any thrill without weighing consequences. I had a wife and two kids here, plus Ethan and Sophie overseas, and I still carried the faint worry that I might slip back into old patterns if I spread myself too thin. But the rational, driven side of me recognized a golden opportunity. "I'd like more details," I replied, heart pounding. "But yes, I'm interested." When I told Juliet that evening, she beamed at me across our small kitchen table, steam rising from a pot of pasta. "You deserve it," she said, resting a hand over mine. "You've worked hard, proven yourself. But do you worry about the time away from us?" I exhaled, glancing at Clara and Damien squabbling over crayons at the table's far end. "A bit. I don't want to be an absentee father," I admitted. "But if the travel is in short bursts, maybe I can balance it." Juliet offered a warm smile. "Let's see what the schedule looks like. We'll figure it out. We always do." That night, as I paced the living room after the kids fell asleep, I texted Ethan, "Hey, big news at work. Might lead to more travel. How are you?" He responded immediately, asking about the promotion with a mix of genuine pride and a subtle undercurrent of longing. Maybe he still wished I was physically closer. "I'm finishing high school soon," he wrote, thinking about college. I realized how close he and Sophie were to that threshold, stepping out of Veronica and Paul's house, forging their own paths. In the quiet hush of midnight, I allowed myself a rush of hope. Maybe once they were on the brink of adulthood, they'd consider a leap like studying abroad in France. A few days later, I had a routine catch-up call with Dad. He, too, sounded excited about my potential promotion. "Son, from the day you set foot in that French branch, you've been climbing up the ranks. It's about time they recognized all you're capable of." His voice held a note of fatherly pride that I still wasn't used to. After all, there'd been a time he visited me behind prison bars, forced to see me at my lowest. To hear him championing my success now felt both surreal and deeply gratifying. Yet amid this swelling positivity, an unwelcome shadow emerged. Veronica. She'd been quiet ever since losing her marriage to Paul and the kids' respect thanks to her repeated infidelity. But about a week after my promotion talk with Pierre, my phone lit up with an unknown U.S. number. I stared at the screen, a cold tingle on my spine. Something told me it might be her. Sure enough, when I picked up, a familiar voice drifted through the line, laced with bitterness and false bravado. "Aiden," Veronica said. "Long time no speak." I sank onto the couch, heart thumping. "Veronica, didn't expect a call." A brittle laugh. "I'm sure you didn't. But I heard some news from the kids. They mentioned you might be traveling more. Thought I'd check in." I stiffened. She'd never cared about my career moves before. "Why does it matter?" She exhaled, the sound crackling with static. "Things have been rough for me. Work's not stable. Paul's obviously out of the picture. And the kids—" Her voice wavered, turning accusatory. "They rarely talk to me like they used to. I know you've gained their favor." A flush of anger rose, but remembering my promise to keep calm, I just said, "They're nearly grown. They make their own decisions." Her tone sharpened. "Well, they're still my children, too. I was hoping we could reach an understanding. Maybe you could encourage them to see me more, or at least not cut me off completely." I stood, walking to the window. The city lights twinkled below. "That's between you and them, Veronica," I said quietly. "I'm not telling them how to feel. They were hurt by what you did, and trust takes time to rebuild if it's even rebuildable." A pregnant pause crackled over the line. I pictured her anger simmering. "You used to be naive," she said, voice taut. "Now you're playing the moral high ground, riding on my kid's affection. But don't forget I was the one who—" I cut her off, a calm I'd honed through years of practice. "I haven't forgotten a thing, but I've also let go of the rage that once controlled me. If you want to talk about the kids, talk to them directly. Don't pull me into it just because you're lonely." For a moment, all I heard was her shaky breathing, then a derisive scoff. "Fine," she hissed. "Let's hope your new life keeps you warm at night, because one day, maybe they'll see you're not as perfect as you pretend to be." The line went dead. Slowly, I set down my phone, taking a moment to regain my composure. "She's floundering," I reminded myself. "Don't let her drag you into old patterns." Just as I turned away, I spotted Juliet in the doorway, concern in her eyes. She must have heard my clipped tone. "Veronica?" she asked softly. I nodded, releasing a breath. "She's looking for pity or someone to blame. I'm not giving her either." Juliet's delicate hand found mine. "That's good," she whispered, leaning in to give me a light kiss on the temple. "Don't let her stir up your anger again." I pressed my forehead against hers. "I won't," I promised. That night I called Ethan didn't mention Veronica's attempt, but gently hinted he might hear from her soon. He sighed over the line. "Yeah, she's texted me a few times, complaining about how we abandoned her. I don't want drama." My heart wrenched for him. "Then set your boundaries, son. It's your right. She needs to own her mistakes, not dump them on you." He murmured agreement, sounding weary. I realized he'd grown up faster than many kids, forced to navigate emotional landmines. But at least now, We had a direct line of communication, no more gatekeepers, no more illusions. In bed that night, I lay awake a while, feeling a twinge of pity for Veronica's spiral. Despite it all, I wouldn't sabotage her attempts to patch things with the kids if she did it honestly. But something told me honesty was never her strong suit. Still, I had my own life to focus on. A swirl of new responsibilities at work, raising Clara and Damien, and supporting Ethan and Sophie's looming futures. Let Veronica handle her meltdown. I wasn't the man who'd let her manipulations burn me anymore. So I turned on my side, found Juliet's warmth in the dim light, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow I'd step forward into bigger challenges, refusing to let the past define me. As the weeks rolled on, my potential promotion morphed into a formal job offer. The upper management invited me to a series of briefings, explaining how I'd head a small team traveling between Lyon, Berlin, and occasionally the States, presenting our new medications benefits to clinics and conferences. It was a step up in salary, prestige, and stress. Juliet, always my pillar, said she'd handle the home front if I had to be away in bursts. But I worried about leaving her alone for weeks at a time, especially with 2 young kids and a still complicated relationship with Ethan and Sophie to maintain. One afternoon, while I was in the middle of a meeting, my phone buzzed with an unexpected American number. I silenced it, returning to the discussion about lab data. But later on my break, I checked the voicemail. It was Paul, the man who had once been married to Veronica, a man I'd helped when he discovered her affair. We hadn't spoken in a while, though I knew from the kids he was doing all right, quietly raising them until they approached adulthood. He sounded polite but hesitant in the message. "Hey, Aiden, hope you're well. I could use your input on something. Give me a call back when you can." Curiosity piqued. I dialed his number that evening from our apartment's balcony, sipping a cup of herbal tea while Juliet wrestled Damien into pajamas. Paul answered on the first ring as though he'd been waiting. "Thanks for calling," he said, voice subdued. "It's about Ethan and Sophie. They're finishing high school soon, as you know, and well, we're trying to figure out college finances, scholarships, living arrangements. This might sound strange, but I'd like your help. You're their biological dad, and they trust you. I figure the more minds we have planning their future, the better." I blinked, an unexpected warmth filling my chest. Once upon a time, the idea of co-parenting with Paul would have sent me into a spiral of anger or jealousy. But now, I realized how far we'd come. "I appreciate you including me," I said gently. "Of course I'll help." Paul sighed, relieved. "I'm kinda new to all this. Veronica never contributed anything structured for them, financially or emotionally. You know how she is. And with her meltdown, they've distanced themselves from her. So I guess it's down to us. And they're not kids anymore. They'll be adults soon, but I want to set them up for success." My heart clenched. "I'm grateful you care so deeply. If you need help with loan applications, budgeting, or even if Ethan or Sophie want to explore universities in Europe, we can discuss that. I can't lie. I'd love having them close, but I also want them to follow their dreams." A short, genuine laugh came through the line. "They've mentioned France, yeah, Sophie especially. She's enthralled by the idea of studying abroad, maybe music or choir programs. Ethan's more practical, he's eyeing engineering or computer science. A chip off your old block, I guess." I grinned, stepping away from the balcony rail as a cool breeze ruffled my hair. "We can definitely look into it. I'll be traveling more soon for work, but I'll do whatever I can. We can have a conference call with the kids, see what they're thinking." We talked for another 15 minutes, hashing out possibilities. Then Paul hesitated, voice dropping. "Thanks, Aiden. Really. I know our story's unusual, but I'm glad we're on the same page for them. I consider them my kids, but I also respect you as their father." My throat tightened. "I appreciate you, Paul. You stepped up when I was absent. That means a lot." When I ended the call, I leaned against the balcony door, exhaling. Juliet peeked out from the living room, curiosity in her gaze. "Everything okay?" I smiled. "Yeah. Paul and I are basically co-fathering or something close to it. It's weird, but good." Her grin was bright. "That's wonderful, mon amour. I'm proud of you both." Later that night, we set up a group video chat. Me in France, Paul with Ethan and Sophie in the living room back in the States. Sophie's excitement practically radiated through the screen. "So, Dad, Is it true you might host me if I want to check out French universities? She gushed about the culture, the language she'd even started practicing with a language app. Ethan listened, intrigued but still cautious. I might do a semester abroad, but I also have some in-state scholarships I'm considering, he admitted. Paul chimed in about the financial aspects, and I offered to chip in, especially for any flights or living expenses if they came to Lyon. The kids lit up, toggling between calling me Dad and calling Paul Dad, yet none of us blinked. The dual father role had become natural. After we ended the call, I realized how drastically life had changed since those earlier days of suspicion and violence. No one screamed or threw punches. We calmly navigated finances and education. Veronica's name never even came up because it was no longer relevant. She'd lost the chance to be part of these vital decisions. That moment hammered home how important it was that I not let my new stress this looming promotion, more travel disrupt the delicate harmony we'd built. If we all communicated openly, we could guide Ethan and Sophie without overshadowing their independence. And maybe, just maybe, we'd see them step off a plane in France one day, wide-eyed, ready to embrace an international life. The next morning, I shared the updates with Dad during our routine call. He sounded thrilled, though he teased me about potentially running a hostel for college kids. Mom overheard and hollered in the background, "At least let them stay with you for a holiday or two." The mental image of a holiday feast with Ethan, Sophie, Juliet, Clara, and Damien all in one place filled me with a warmth that made the day's stress melt away. Work that afternoon buzzed with tension, finalizing project budgets, scheduling the first wave of promotional travel. My boss, Pierre, confirmed a multi-country itinerary for me. I'd be away for a couple of weeks at a time, home for short stints. It was daunting, but I accepted it, determined to keep my promise to the kids and to Juliet. Over dinner that night, simple grilled chicken and vegetables, I outlined the schedule for Juliet, who nodded with calm acceptance. "We'll manage," she said, smiling. "Besides, we have help. Your parents want to come again, maybe for an extended stay. And Clara's in school full day now. Damien's not far behind." I squeezed her hand across the table. "You're amazing," I murmured. "Thank you for always understanding." She laughed lightly. "Don't thank me yet. I might be cursing you when both kids have colds and you're in Berlin." I grinned. "Fair enough." Later, I tucked Clara and Damien into bed, reading them a short story about a fearless night. As I turned out the lights, I paused by the window, looking at the moonlit street. My phone chimed with a text from Sophie. "Merci, papa." She'd started peppering her messages with French. My chest swelled, because in that single phrase, I saw the bridging of worlds, the father who once lost everything, now uniting a multinational family with calm, steady love. The next few months, I embarked on a nomadic rhythm, juggling fatherhood, marriage, and professional ambition. One week in Berlin, presenting data to a consortium of researchers, the next in Lyon polishing new marketing materials, then a few days in the US for a major conference. Juliet teased me about collecting passport stamps like trophies, yet each time I collapsed into bed at home, I found her presence grounding, her unwavering faith in me a balm against old insecurities. During one of my US trips, I arranged a weekend layover near my hometown, partly to see Dad, Mom, and partly to connect with Ethan and Sophie. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, the nostalgia hit me. The squeak of the front porch steps, the faint smell of freshly cut grass. Dad greeted me at the door, cane propped against the wall. Though he rarely used it now, he was stronger than ever. Mom bustled out from the kitchen, peppering me with questions about French co-workers and whether I'd brought more fancy chocolates. On Saturday afternoon, Ethan and Sophie arrived. They'd driven themselves in Sophie's battered sedan, both looking older, sharper. Sophie wore a ponytail and beamed as she hugged me. Ethan clapped me on the shoulder. "Good to see you in person, Dad," he said, a grin edging his features. "Virtual calls only go so far." We spent the afternoon on the back porch, sipping iced tea, discussing their college choices. Sophie was set on a liberal arts program with a strong music department. She'd applied to a French exchange program that might let her spend a semester in Lyon. Ethan leaned toward an in-state engineering path, but he confessed a curiosity about Europe, maybe for a shorter program or internship. I listened, heart full, offering support without pushing. Dad, perched on a patio chair, occasionally chimed in with anecdotes about how I found my passion in chemical engineering. Mom fussed over the snack tray, ensuring we had enough chips and dip. Sophie teased her about stereotypes of grandmas feeding you non-stop. Laughter wove through the afternoon sunlight, a testament to how far we'd come as a family. That evening, after Dad headed to bed early, I caught Ethan and Sophie exchanging glances. Sophie cleared her throat. "Dad, we had a text from Mom." She watched me warily, as though bracing for an explosion. I set down my iced tea. "Veronica?" Ethan nodded. "She wants to reconnect, says she's changed, that she's sorry. She asked if we could do dinner next week. We're not sure how to handle it." A flicker of old tension flared, but I breathed deeply, remembering my vow. Calm, always. "It's your choice," I said gently. "If you feel ready to listen to her, you can. Just keep your guard up. I won't lie, she said that before, but maybe she's genuine now." Sophie let out a shaky sigh. "We're torn. Paul says we should do what feels right for us. We wanted your opinion, too." I rubbed my scar absent-mindedly. "My opinion is that you trust your instincts. If you want closure, or to see if she can change, go for it. But if it gets toxic, walk away. Don't let her guilt trip you." Ethan exhaled, nodding. "That's what we thought." Then his lips quirked in a wry grin. "You're a better dad than you realize, you know. A couple years ago, you might have told us never to see her again." Emotion swelled in my chest. "A couple years ago, I was an angrier man," I admitted softly. "But I've learned, and I trust you too." They offered small smiles, each hugging me goodnight. In bed, my mind churned with memories. Veronica's frantic calls, her manipulative pleas. She might be lonely, truly regretful, or simply repeating a cycle. Either way, I had to let Ethan and Sophie navigate it themselves. My job now was to be a steady anchor if they needed me. The next morning, I took an early flight back to France, hugging Dad and Mom goodbye at the airport. Dad told me to keep the updates coming, about Ethan's final college decision, about any progress with Sophie's exchange program. "We'll be rooting for them," he said. "And we'll be rooting for you too, son." When I landed in Lyon, the swirl of French voices felt like a second home. Juliet and the kids met me at arrivals, Damien crashing into my legs, Clara squealing with delight. I soaked in their affection, but my thoughts still drifted to Ethan and Sophie. That evening, once the kids slept, I scrolled my phone, checking for any sign they'd met Veronica. Finally, a message from Sophie popped up. We saw her. It was not great. She cried, said she missed us, but also blamed us for abandoning her. We left early. I felt a pang of sadness for them. "I'm sorry," I texted back. "Take your time processing. I'm here if you need to talk," she replied with a simple heart emoji. I stared at the screen a moment, remembering how once I'd have raged, tried to shield them forcibly from Veronica's manipulations, but they were nearly adults, forging their own boundaries. If her meltdown hammered home anything, it was that she'd lost the power to truly hurt them, unless they let her. Time swept me into work obligations presentations, budget meetings, short trips to other European branches. My boss praised my adaptability, and I earned a reputation for calm leadership. My old bar fight impulses had long since been replaced with a methodical approach. Even when a coworker, Marion, bickered about funding, I kept my tone measured, diplomatic. People noticed. "You never lose your cool," Marion muttered one day in the break room, almost admiringly. I just offered a tight smile. If only she knew the rage I once unleashed. At home, Juliet teased that I was turning into a mild-mannered executive type, but she also looked proud. I'd slide an arm around her waist and murmur, "If that's what it takes to keep us safe and happy, I'll own it." She'd laugh softly, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Every few weeks, I'd carve out time for a video chat with Ethan and Sophie. They seemed to grow more assured with each call, finalizing plans for college. Sophie's exchange application was in its final review. She joked about learning French slang, rattling off a phrase that made me snort. Ethan said he might do a short summer program if finances lined up, especially if I had room for him to crash. "Always," I told him. voice thick with gratitude. The future felt bright, full of possibilities for them, for me, for our entire family. Even the memory of Veronica faded into background noise, a cautionary tale, but no longer the looming threat. Now and then, I'd see a cryptic message from her on Ethan or Sophie's social media, or hear that she texted them with regretful pleas. But they handled it gracefully, setting boundaries. "We're not shutting her out entirely," Ethan said once, "but we're not letting her guilt trip us either." I marveled at their maturity, a testament to the calm environment Paul and I had managed to cultivate. One quiet evening, as I relaxed on the couch, Clara asleep in my arms, Juliet curled next to me, I flicked through photos on my phone. There was one from that day in the hospital courtyard, me with Ethan and Sophie, Dad's room in the background. Another from France, Dad and Mom sampling local cuisine. A third, newly added, showing me at a conference in Berlin, smiling confidently behind a podium. The transformation was stark, from a man once driven by fury and betrayal to someone bridging 2 continents with a measured, steady hand. Leaning my head against Juliet's, I closed my eyes. We still had a final chapter of this story, unfolding Ethan and Sophie's approach to adulthood, how I'd juggle new projects, and the potential for all of us to truly unify as a patchwork family. But for the first time, I felt no dread, only a slow, resonant peace. Because no matter what came next, we had a sturdy framework built from second chances, quiet growth, and a refusal to be defined by old wounds. Summer arrived in a wash of golden sunlight, and with it came a flurry of milestone moments. Sophie's acceptance to the exchange program set her abuzz with excitement. She and Ethan graduated high school on the same balmy weekend, sporting caps and gowns as they marched across a stage to receive diplomas. I couldn't be there in person, work demanded I be in Berlin that week, but we planned a special video call afterward, Paul filming the ceremony. My parents cheered from the crowd, texting me frantic updates. They did it! Sophie's speech was beautiful. Ethan looked so grown up. Later that evening, I scrolled through photos of them in their graduation robes, hearts twisting with pride and a pang of regret that I wasn't physically by their side. Yet, the knowledge we'd bridged an ocean of distance and pain kept me from spiraling into old guilt. I'd done what I could, given the circumstances, and they understood. After the ceremony, we all hopped on a group video call, Ethan, Sophie, Dad, Mom, Paul, and me from a sterile Berlin hotel room. The screen flickered with half a dozen faces, laughter overlapping as we tried to talk over each other. Sophie, eyes shining, gushed about the choir piece she sang at the ceremony. Ethan teased her about hitting a high note that cracked his eardrums. Dad beamed, cane by his side, but posture relaxed. "We're unbelievably proud," he said. "And Aiden, they keep talking about France. Are you ready for these 2 to invade your apartment?" Sophie giggled, shaking her head. "I won't be invading. The exchange program sets me up with a dorm. But I might need Dad to show me around." She tossed me a bright grin through the screen. "What if I get lost on the metro?" I chuckled. "You know I'm a phone call away, and if you want a weekend escape from campus, our apartment has a futon with your name on it." Ethan chimed in, a bit quieter. "I'm starting local college, but maybe next year I can do a summer semester abroad. So keep that couch free, or at least feed me once in a while." We all laughed, warmth flooding the call. In that moment, I felt as though we'd reached a pinnacle, 2 kids stepping into their futures, both open to connecting with my world in France, letting me be the dad I'd once feared I could never be. After we hung up, I stared at the empty hotel room, heart thrumming with gratitude. We still had challenges: my frequent travel, their budding independence, the question of how Veronica might stir the pot. But if we'd learned anything, it was that honest communication and mutual respect could keep us anchored. Back in Lyon a week later, I shared the news with Juliet over dinner. She lit up. "So Sophie's definitely coming to France soon? That's amazing. I'll help her adjust, show her the local markets, help with the language. The poor girl won't know what hit her when she sees how tiny some French dorm rooms are." I grinned, excitement crackling. She might love it, or she might be homesick. Either way, we'll be around. And if Ethan visits next summer, we can do family trips around Europe. As I spoke, Damien tugged at my sleeve, wanting me to admire his latest crayon masterpiece. Clara prattled about a new friend at school. The lively chaos of our current life merged with visions of Sophie and Ethan integrated into it, forging a bigger, bolder family dynamic. Around that time, Veronica sent another message. Sophie forwarded it to me with a simple caption. Eye roll. The text read like a guilt-laden rant. Veronica claimed she was remaking her life, that they owed her a chance, that she was lonely, and their father me never truly cared about them. Sophie's commentary told me enough. She no longer bought into Veronica's manipulations. The kids occasionally met her for short, strained lunches, but the damage was done. Veronica's role was that of a distant, regretful figure, overshadowed by her own mistakes. In one sense, it was sad nobody sets out wanting to have a broken relationship with their mother, but the kids had chosen a more honest environment with me, Paul, and my parents. Their new lives were blossoming, and Veronica's attempts to rewrite the narrative failed to resonate. She remained on the periphery, a cautionary tale about betrayal's long-lasting fallout. Summer melted into autumn. The day Sophie arrived in Lyon for her exchange, I stood at the airport arrivals gate with Juliet. My nerves fluttered, both excited and worried. Then Sophie appeared, pushing a wheeled suitcase, scanning the crowd. When she spotted me, her face lit up. We collided in a tight hug, laughter echoing in the busy terminal. She exclaimed over the French signs, the stylish passers-by. Juliet offered her a warm hug, flicking into half-French, half-English greetings. Sophie tried to respond in her fledgling French, but quickly lapsed into a mix of both languages, and we all laughed. Driving her to the dorm, Sophie peppered me with questions. Which cafes to try, how to get a local cell plan, whether it was weird she felt both thrilled and terrified. I reassured her every student felt the same. As we reached the campus, bustling with international faces, I recalled my own culture shock years ago. Now here I was, guiding my daughter through a parallel transition. The irony wasn't lost on me. For the first few days, Sophie leaned on me, heavily calling if she got lost, inviting me for a quick campus tour. But soon she made friends, joined a music club, and found her footing. Juliet and I had her over for Sunday dinners, letting her try homemade French dishes. Sometimes we'd FaceTime Paul, Dad, or Ethan mid-meal, showing them the city lights outside our balcony. Dad teased Sophie about turning full French, and she teased right back. I watched her blossom. The fear that once clutched my heart, that I'd forever be the father who missed his children's milestones, gradually eased, because here she was, forging new experiences in my adopted home, forging them with me. Ethan teased from across the ocean that he'd come soon, too, maybe next summer. Don't hog all the croissants, he joked in our group chat. One evening, after I dropped Sophie at her dorm, I returned home to find Juliet reading on the couch, Clara and Damien fast asleep. She looked up, smiling at me. How is she? I sank beside her, heart light. Happy, busy. She's got a dozen invites for weekend trips already. Juliet nestled against me. I love seeing you like this, fulfilled as a father, bridging your worlds. She paused, searching my face. Do you ever resent Veronica now? I stared at the ceiling a moment, letting the hush settle. No, I said slowly. I feel sorry for her. She's missing out on everything. But she made those choices. Juliet nodded, placing a gentle hand over my scar. You've truly moved on, she whispered, pride in her eyes. I kissed her palm, a wave of gratitude rising, because indeed, we had all transformed the old anger into something life-affirming. The final piece was Ethan's eventual visit, a milestone that hovered on the horizon, promising to cement this patchwork family further. Life had taught me that nothing is guaranteed. Relationships can fracture. Betrayals can blindside. But we'd proven we could rise above the bitterness, forging new alliances with calm intelligence. Now I held a key role at work, traveled without fear of losing my temper, and watched my children both in the U.S. and in France thrive. The scalding regrets that once haunted me had softened into quiet lessons. In the dim lamplight, I pulled Juliet close, savoring the contented hush. My mind drifted to a future holiday, maybe all of us around one table, Dad regaling us with old stories, Clara and Damien giggling with Ethan and Sophie, Juliet gently bantering with my mom. I imagined Paul there too, because why not? We were past the days of jealousy, forging an unlikely but respectful alliance. Even Henry and Elizabeth might come, turning our home into a tapestry of languages and laughter. And Veronica? Possibly a distant figure shaped by regret, on the outside looking in at what she'd forfeited. In that moment, I felt the final pieces click. The man who'd once bloodied his friend in a rage, who'd lost everything, was now at peace. Scarred by betrayal, yes, but forging a purposeful, joyful life. No longer defined by the shadows, but by quiet determination, unwavering love, and the slow-motion triumph of strategic choices over blind anger. I closed my eyes, letting the future stretch out in a luminous horizon. And in the comforting hush of our living room, I embraced the knowledge that, whatever came next, I was ready with a family that spanned continents and hearts big enough to hold every piece of our extraordinary tale.